What is up, fine people? Good morning. Sorry to rattle the mic around on you right there. Right as we get started, we're off to a great start. Got to get the nicotine going. So, first of all, shout out to Pete Quinones in the chat. No fucking blackpilling. As soon as this show's over, go watch the. If you're subscribed to his Substack, I don't know if this was what audience this went out to or whatever, but I got a Substack notification from Mr. Pete Quinones this morning, and it was a great video talking about I don't remember what he called it, something about the our guys question. It's very, very good, very good. I pulled one quote from it and tweeted it this morning. That was it's public. Okay, perfect, great. So go to Pete Quinones' Substack and watch his little thing he dropped this morning, about 20 minutes or so. Just some really good thoughts. It was a good, motivating, inspiring way to start the day. I stood out in the front porch in the sunshine with the chest hair flowing, smoking a cigarette, drinking a coffee, and listening to my good buddy Pete Quinones. So wanted to give a shout out to him. First of all, what's up, everybody in the chat? Good to see all of you. We've got some members of the King Pilled in here. If you want to become a channel member, $5 a month, you can become one of the King Pilled, and then you get to have a little green name next to your in your chat on the live chat. Yeah, $5 a month, you can become one of the King Pilled. This is the last day of July, so this is the last day if you want to throw some support the channel's direction for. Shout out to Colin Roch. He's just joined, become one of the King Pilled. This is the last day of the month if you want to throw some support our way with a super chat or becoming a channel member. We very much appreciate it. It helps us keep doing what we're doing. And shout out to Colin Roch. He's a good egg. Colin Roch is also another way if you want to support the show is the King Pilled Discord. We've got a great group of guys in there. Just got a Magoo from the chat. He just joined. I guess I'll air out your business. It's a private chat. There's a paywall for a reason. But we've got some good people in there. Magoo joined last night. Good to see him in there. And one of my morning workflows when I'm setting up for the show is I just go and scroll through and see all the stories people are dropping in there. So if you want to put stuff in front of me to get it out here on the show, then that's one of the ways you can do it. You can also shoot me a DM on Twitter @RealKingPilled. So speaking of Pete Quinones, he shot me over a story this morning that I was looking at just before we went live, and this one fit perfectly with a couple of the stories I had here. So I shoved it into the stack, as it were, just before we went live here. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff to go through today. We're going to cover a lot of territory, but as always, we've got to get started with a little this here little celebration of White Boy Summer, because no matter what's happening, no matter how dark the world may seem at times, we got to remember it is still White Boy Summer. And this is a white boy enjoying White Boy Summer. Uncle Doomer says, "Me after two Modelos." I just wish that it was a little bit longer because it was just starting to get going. This brings back lots of fond memories of being down in Central America. It's really a beautiful place. Very, very beautiful part of the world. The people are great. Yeah, you got your bad eggs everywhere you go, but generally, at least when I was there, this was 15 years ago or so. I loved it. One of my favorite places in the world. I went to Guatemala, went to Honduras, went to Mexico a couple of times, and I always loved it every time I was there. So this brings back very fond memories. This is one of the reasons why El Salvador is always going to be in the back of my mind as a possibility for retreating to, should it come to that. All right, so that was number one, and then about as far away culturally as you can get from that, we have. Do you speak Canadian? How many of you guys out there, if you are Canadian, I'd like to know, how much of this do you speak? I speak a little bit of it. I went to boarding academy in Canada, and I loved my time there as well. But I speak a little bit of it, but I definitely have lost a lot, and some of this I never even learned because I think this is Eastern Canada. But let me know, you Canucks out there in the chat, what are your takes?
Just speak proper Canadian to the point where we can't understand you. You know what, bud? I'm pretty sure I can help you out with that one there, because just the other day I decided to fuck the dog and take a rip over to Tim's to grab a double and some Timbits. Tell you right now, there's some pretty not bad pricing on that shit, because it only set me back a couple loonies and a toonie. After that, skirted on over to the Lickbo. Figured a couple wobbly pops wouldn't get the job done, even if I grabbed a twofer of them, and everyone knows there's not enough juice inside of Mickey. So I just decided to fucking send it straight for a 2.6. You know what, bud? You get some of that in you with a couple darts there, and it'll turn you into a proper fucking shit disturber right on the spot. Anyway, brought the Twixer over to the bush with some buddies to get some fucking shinny going, and a couple of Habs fans showed up with their stupid sweaters there. Tell you right now, bud, the chirps were just fucking flying, bud. Their twigs were in worse shape than our goddamn government, and that shit's in fucking shambles right now, I'll tell you that. Anyway, can you make a video where you just speak proper?
What in the letter, Kenny? Shout out to our Canucks. We love you guys. $4.99 super chat from Colin, Cursed World Problems Podcast. He says, thank you for the high praise from yesterday's stream. We will win together. That's right. That's right. Shout out to Colin. Go, if you are not subscribed to the Cursed World Problems Podcast on YouTube or on your favorite podcatcher, then you're not doing life right. All right. So let's see here. Next thing I got here is, speaking of funny accents, I didn't even plan this one. This segued in real nice. So, Miss Russian on Twitter says, this fake accent is even funnier when you realize she spent much of her formative years speaking French in Quebecois, Canada with her Hindu mother.
And you all helped us win in 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024. Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
Look at this guy back here. Look at our poor white brother. How down bad he is.
Yes, we will.
That's like, that smile is the ultimate, like, smiling through the cringe. Like, no, it's actually great. Oh, I love it. Oh, it's so good.
So let's get right.
Our man is in a bad spot. Oops, I actually didn't. I was going to... I stopped screen share too soon, but I was just going to show you a Boniface option on Twitter. 8th Century Wood Chipper. He said, got kicked out of Popeyes because I placed my order talking like this. It's a banger. So another little thing, as I was poking around through Twitter today, I saw this in the context of her breaking out her inner black lady. During an interview in 2019, Kamala Harris was asked if she smoked pot growing up. She answered, half my family's from Jamaica. Are you kidding me? After the interview, her father issued this statement: we wish to categorically dissociate ourselves from this travesty. The full statement says, my dear departed grandmothers, whose extraordinary legacy I described in a recent essay on this website, as well as my deceased parents, must be turning in their grave right now to see their family's name, reputation, and proud Jamaican identity being connected, in any way, jokingly or not, with the fraudulent stereotype of a pot-smoking joy seeker and in the pursuit of identity politics, he wrote. Speaking for myself and my immediate Jamaican family, we wish to categorically dissociate ourselves from this travesty, he added. And they became estranged. Which is funny. This reminds me very much of Barack Obama and Malik Obama. Malik being Barack's brother, who claims that, well, he feeds the Big Mike claims, and the whole birther thing. Like he's been a huge Trump supporter for a long time. He's one of the most bizarre phenomena on the internet is watching Malik Obama basically post like a combination of I don't know, Perry Abbasi and Alex Jones. That's kind of his personality. That's what this reminds me of. A woman, not just a woman, not just the ultimate girl boss, but she's the girl boss who has been disowned by her parents for associating their heritage with being a bunch of degenerate pot smokers. That's Lord help us all. So from at Kamala wins, breaking. More than 100 Silicon Valley investors, including Mark Cuban and Reid Hoffman, are organizing tech executives to fundraise enormous sums of money for Vice President Kamala Harris. Let's go. This brings a bunch of interesting thoughts to the head, to the old noggin here. Number one, I don't even know if this is actually like legit. This is the only thing I've seen talking about it, but like this is one of those things where the facts on the ground don't really matter. Because number one, like, yeah, they've been organizing tech executives has been happening for a long time. This is kind of the whole the profoundness of the phenomenon of the tech executives organizing for Trump is that the default state has been the tech executives organizing to donate to whoever the Democratic candidate is. And you've now, so like posting a tweet like this is like claiming that what's been happening is happening. Okay, cool. At the same time, I'm sure there is probably an element at play here where guys like Reid Hoffman and Mark Cuban are really starting to try to whip their guys into shape. They're functioning kind of like the whip in Congress. They're going around and they're like, come on, we need to get our shit together here and act in a coordinated fashion. Now, you can't underestimate the power of that. But this is part of the game. You're not going to have the tech executives, a cabal of them, making their move aligned with and backed by various other interests. They're not going to make a big open move like this and not get some kind of a counter move. But what this indicates is this is elements of the regime reacting. They're in a reactive posture. Oh, you guys organized? Hey, we got to organize too. It's something that's been happening, but they're doing it even more now. Now there's demand from whatever this account is, and it's the people running it. There's demand for them to create this counter narrative. No, actually our tech guys too. We got tech guys. Look. There's tech guys here. We're cool. You don't need to, if you want to be cool like the tech guys, then you could still be cool and a Democrat. This is a shift. Is the shift permanent? Will they wrestle back the narrative at some point? That's TBD. We can play some manner of a role in that, which means we can start having an impact on what's happening, which means we need to be much more cognizant about the things that we're choosing to do with our time and the where we're beginning to direct our energy. Like when you're a people of little power, when you have very little influence around you, then the magnitude of the importance of each thing you do is lessened. Then it's more like you need to be concerned about the things you're doing because you're still affecting some people and ultimately you're affecting yourself. But then as your influence scales, this is why power and responsibility go together. As your influence scales, you become more and more responsible, not just for what the whatever actions you're taking, not just the effect they have on you personally, but the effect that they have on the people that you're affecting. And this applies fractally at all levels because this is the way that human organisms move. Human organisms move with certain nodes that begin gathering and collecting in a particular direction, which then forms like a gravitational pull that pulls other nodes behind it, which then pull other nodes behind them. This process is generally very slow, but the rise of ability to communicate and organize in a much closer to real-time manner, that dynamic of the internet and then specifically social media on top of the internet has accelerated the rate at which these sorts of social movements can gain steam and go. So it'd be kind of like, I don't know, gradually going from driving in like really thick mud, gradually to driving on ice. So if you're in really thick mud, you've got to be like, you're pumping it and you're having to kind of bounce your way through and grind and try to get through the mud. But then all of a sudden you break out onto ice and you're going to go spinning off out of control if you keep driving the same way. There's kind of a social element to that you start off as, this little tiny little faction that's going to really got to grind and grind and grind. And you could kind of be a little undisciplined or a little disorganized or whatever, and it's not that big of a deal. But as things begin picking up steam, then each of your actions becomes more and more important. There's a greater and greater stake to each one of them. Anyways, I don't know how I got off wandering down that track. Yeah, we're seeing what this is. This is mimesis. We're watching memetics play out in front of us. Regardless of it's not that the facts on the ground don't matter. It's that the facts on the ground that are noticed and having an impact are the ones that correspond to this. The story that's playing out here. Whether it's, the tech executives have been organizing all along, and now they're organizing more intensely. They're still, the reason they're organizing more intensely is an act of mimetic rivalry to Trump's tech CEOs. And it just so happens that some of Trump's tech CEOs are explicitly and cognizantly aware of mimetic theory. And they are well schooled in it and actually taking it and weaponizing it, which is part of what makes them such a potentially significant elite class. There's great danger with that. There's also great opportunity. So this gets us to the thing Mr. Pete Quinones sent over to me a little bit ago from Business Insider. Inside the proletariat revolution, tech elites hate the media, so they're taking a page from Fox News. Written by Zoe Bernard. Now, where is there a date here for when this was written? It refers to pretty recent current events, so it's relatively recent. Let me see if the original link had. This is yesterday. Posted yesterday. Okay, so Zoe Bernard. It was December 2020 in San Francisco, and Mike Solana was fed up. In the wake of the pandemic, as many of his friends and colleagues in the tech industry were leaving the city, the anti-tech media was shaping their exodus into yet another hysterical narrative. Quote, there was this idea that tech people had come, extracted all the wealth in San Francisco, and moved on, says Solana, the chief marketing officer at Founders Fund, a venture firm co-founded by Peter Thiel and known for its bets on Airbnb, Palantir, and OpenAI. The premise was just totally wrong. To set the record straight, he took to his Substack. In a piece called Extract or Die, Solana argued it wasn't tech that was the parasitic blight on the city, it was government officials. Tech companies had brought San Francisco unfathomable wealth, money that went on to be mismanaged by politicians who had exacerbated every one of the city's issues, from the housing shortage to drug use. Quote, the truth is, he wrote, with characteristic bombast, had tech workers actually assumed a significant measure of political influence and led in local politics, San Francisco would today be one of the greatest cities in the world. There's a very telling, we're seeing the origin story for the hero's journey of the rising counter-elite faction. This is their origin story. Solana's cri de coeur ignited a corner of the internet. Hundreds of engineers, executives, and venture capitalists shared the article and thanked Solana for speaking up for them. His Substack, Pirate Wires, gained thousands of subscribers. The response was overwhelming, and he realized there was a role he could fill within the media landscape. Quote, it helped me understand what I was doing that no one else was really doing, he says. Pirate Wires, he resolved, would become its own full-fledged media company. With backing from Founders Fund, Solana hired 4 full-time editors and writers, moved from Substack to a splashy website reminiscent of Vice, and wrote a swashbuckling mission statement about being an antidote to, quote, our modern publishing giants and, quote, draconian political censorship. But he was far from the only one in tech who decided it was time for tech to punch back. Over the past few years, a cadre of prominent tech founders, investors, and personalities, most but not all of them wealthy middle-aged white men, have launched their own tech-focused media projects. The most famous of these is All In, the clubby podcast hosted by the investors David Sachs, Jason Calacanis, Chamath Palihapitiya, and David Friedberg. Regularly near the top of Apple and Spotify charts since it debuted in March of 2020, interesting date, the show features the self-proclaimed besties pontificating on startup investments, politics, and poop jokes. They frequently bring the most influential people on the planet in for friendly interviews, including Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Tucker Carlson, and Donald Trump. There's also Coogan, a popular YouTube channel in which John Coogan, a co-founder of the health food company Soylent, narrates short laudatory documentaries about tech companies and entrepreneurs, like How to Build Like Elon Musk and The Epic History of Artificial Intelligence, a sort of why we fight for Silicon Valley. Elite venture firms like Andreessen Horowitz and Sequoia Capital, and even tech companies like, is this CoinBR? Let me see. Link's broken. I think it's supposed to be CoinBR, but I can't tell if the link's cut off or not, have launched their own media arms, publishing glossy magazine-style profiles of founders and breathless essays about the ecstatic future of tech, especially AI, while combating misinformation about the industry and the legacy media. Most of these projects have branded themselves techno-optimistic, a phrase popularized by Mark Andreessen in his 5,000-word chest-thumping techno-optimist manifesto. If you want to understand what's going on right now, that's a good... Maybe I should do a live reading of that. Though they compete for attention, they're unified in a primary agenda to advance the idea that, as Andreessen puts it, quote, technology is the glory of human ambition and achievement, the spearhead of progress, and the realization of our potential. While it's tempting to cast the pro-tech media as PR with some razzle-dazzle, there's another side to its agenda, to call out the enemies of tech, namely regulation, wokeism, legacy media, and increasingly liberal politicians. These outlets are fast becoming the spaces where tech's most powerful players unapologetically say what they really think. It also gives them the opportunity to circumvent scrutiny from traditional media, shaping counter-narratives on their own terms. The pro-tech media is, above all, a call to arms for the tech industry. In the words of Solana, it is a, quote, revolution of the proletariat. Or, as the investor Balaji Srinivasan put in a recent interview with Pirate Wires, it is, quote, information warfare of one tribe versus another. And as the pro-tech media's influence rises, its founders and followers are taking this war into their offices, city halls, and even presidential politics. For many years, the pro-tech media had no reason to exist, as much of traditional media either ignored tech or cheered it on. Solana, who began his career as a book editor in the Penguin Group in New York, likely speaks for many when he admits that he was once so insulated from Silicon Valley that he was unaware it was a real place. I genuinely thought it was a metaphor, the 38-year-old says. Just 20 years ago, journalists covered the tech industry, quote, like it didn't matter, because it was this hobbyist, interesting, plucky thing. Back then, startup founders like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk were trumpeted as rebels and aspirational leaders. But to Solana and many in the tech industry, ever since Donald Trump's social media-fueled election in 2016, many of these same founders have been treated to unrelenting scrutiny and scorn. So yeah, like both are true. They were treated as rebels and aspirational leaders. And then it changed. And they were then treated to unrelenting scrutiny and scorn. But the legacy media and its apparatchiks will just look back at this and say, well, look at this. Look at all these quotes where they were treated as rebels and aspirational leaders. And there's still some people in media who will treat them as rebels and aspirational leaders. So the people will turn and say, look, everyone's still doing it. Everyone's always treated them like they're rebels and aspirational leaders. Meanwhile, the position they represent is the one that's overwhelmingly beaten us over the head and shoved down our throats constantly. That has actually had the force of government behind it. So, like, this is Scott Adams watching two different movies on the same screen. As Solana puts it, it felt like, quote, the entire startup ecosystem, the concept of startups, anybody working in this stuff was deemed suspicious and bad, and that the future would be bad. Close quote. On the surface, the pro-tech media aims to bring back some now much-needed hype to the industry. Many of Silicon Valley's most touted innovations over the past several years have failed to live up to their promises. Cryptocurrency, NFTs, the metaverse, Web3. Meanwhile, the narrative that's being laid out here, kind of cynically, is that these guys believe that the media has been misrepresenting them. And then she goes on to say, many of their most touted innovations have not lived up to their promises. She's immediately going to doing the thing that she just said that they were complaining about people doing. Meanwhile, several of its most prominent and lucrative products, most glaringly social media, are increasingly scrutinized by regulators. Sam Bankman-Fried, once touted as the next Warren Buffett, is serving 25 years for fraud. Gen Z is turning away from working for big tech. An industry once made up of innovators and upstart disruptors has become corporate, bloated, and complacent. It's become long-housed. I'm saying that. To many, tech has lost the plot. The pro-tech media gives tech's main characters the chance to write their way back into the original storyline that the industry is, quote, making the world a better place. So from these guys' perspective, the way that their industry has become corporate, bloated, and complacent is through the constant, relentless barrage of negative press and hostile regulation. Like, they're having to comply with this DEI and ESG stuff. And so, yeah, it makes us really bloated and incompetent. We can't hire for competency. So we get bloated and incompetent. And then the people who won't let us hire for competency are now lambasting us for being bloated and incompetent. This is the perspective of these guys. Trey Stevens, a partner at Founders Fund, described Pirate Wires as a kind of daily affirmation for Silicon Valley. Quote, we believe in... this is actually Andreessen. We believe in the romance of technology of industry, Andreessen writes in the Techno Optimist Manifesto. The eros of the train, the car, the electric light, the skyscraper, and the microchip, the neural network, the rocket, the split atom. Close quote. The pro-tech media is full of this type of romanticizing. Recent Coogan videos include Palantir, the app that caught bin Laden, Anduril, the startup reshaping geopolitics, and This Email Changed the Credit Card Industry, a 30-minute documentary about the payment platform's startup Ramp. Pirate Wires 2 touts the awesome promises of tech with headlines like Palmer Luckey saves the world and We need to be living forever, and theatrical oorah proposals for why, quote, now is the time to build the greatest era of human civilization. Trey Stevens, a partner at Founders Fund, described Pirate Wires as a kind of daily affirmation for Silicon Valley. It's not only, quote, it's not only techno-optimistic, but it also has a nostalgic vibe, he says. Like, we were great, we are great, and we can be great. That's an empowering message to people who are building. Or, as Dick Lucas, a software developer who subscribes to Pirate Wires, put it to me, quote, why would I read the tech section of a news site when I can go to the tech publication that's in tech with the people that are doing the stuff? Lucas's bio on X is emblematic of much of the pro-tech media's audience. It's interesting that it's not X, formerly known as Twitter. Lucas's bio on X is emblematic of much of the pro-tech media's audience. Quote, techno-optimist, American dynamism, long Mars, long humanity, long crypto, long freedom, accelerate or die. Close quote. These readers tend to see themselves, as Lucas describes it, not as tinfoil hat guys or burn it down guys, but as rational but radical contrarians. They're basically libertarians. They're like pragmatic libertarians who live in the real world and have accomplished things. These are all identity-driven brands, and their identities vary. All In is like a cross between Joe Rogan and The View. Fratty, barbed, gossipy. Coogan opts for an informed but breathless documentary-style approach. Coogan, who's an entrepreneur in residence at Founders Fund, often receives comments that he is running ads on behalf of the firm. Meanwhile, Pirate Wires is urgent and irreverent, often veering into winding tangents that yield contradictory insights. A typical passage, quote, now that Kamala is running for president, don't ask how, it was inevitable the press would pivot to publicity for Team Coconut. But with gaslighting so extreme and months to go before the election, it looks like our entire world's about to be rewritten. Screenshot everything and try to remember who you are. Close quote. As Stevens put it, reading Pirate Wires feels, quote, like being inside Solana's brain. This is a friend to me. Someone who looks at the world and thinks about the world like this is someone I want to be friends with. But both the progenitors of these projects and their fans share an overarching ethos that building and turgidly celebrating tech is itself an identity. They also tend to share other aspects of their identities. 70% of Pirate Wire's paid subscribers are men ages 25 to 40 who work in tech and finance. In his own words, Solana is writing for and perpetuating a, quote, new class of people building new things who are, quote, increasingly isolated from mainstream culture. One aim of the pro-tech media is to crystallize and propel an unapologetic, unified block of people working toward a shared vision of tech. Us. The other is to identify, call out, and neutralize its detractors. Them. Quote, it's weird that tech people have been painted as the villains, says Packy McCormick, whose techno-optimistic Substack, Not Boring, has some 225,000 subscribers. Pro-tech media outlets, he says, are, quote, reframing who the villains are. The media and its perceived anti-tech bias are frequently in the pro-tech media's crosshairs, from entire publications like The Washington Post and TechCrunch to individual tech journalists like Taylor Lorenz, Ryan Mack, and Kevin Roos. Pirate Wires has published two particularly acerbic stories, one by Solana, one by the journalist Jesse Singal, criticizing one story by the journalist Casey Newton that they argued wildly overplayed the rise of Nazis on Substack. Quote, Casey isn't a journalist, Solana wrote. Casey is a political activist who calls himself a journalist in service of mainstreaming his activism under the cover of neutrality. That kind of writing needs a counterpoint, and it just never had one before, Solana tells me of his Newton articles. Newton declined to comment for this story. Tech was held accountable by legacy media, and now Pirate Wires is holding legacy media accountable, said Eric Torenberg, the founder of the pro-tech company Turpentine Media, who was the host of the Balaji Srinivasan video we watched the other day. On Pirate Wires, Jeremiads have been written against Anthony Fauci, Ellen Pao, NPR CEO Catherine Mayer, DEI activists at Google, San Francisco's DEI industrial complex, DEI at large, and Disney. That's quite the array of things to castigate, and that gives you an indication of where these people are coming from. The pro-tech media's other adversaries are a constellation of government, corporate, and entertainment figures dubbed too reflexively anti-tech, too anti-growth, or too politically correct. On Pirate Wires, Jeremiads have been written against Anthony Fauci, who oversaw one of the greatest erosions of institutional trust in American history, quote unquote. Ellen Pao, the quote, architect of tech's #MeToo movement. DEI activists at Google, DEI at large, Disney for its penchant for, quote, girl boss protagonists, and NPR CEO Catherine Mayer for her, quote, near-perfect record of ideological opposition to Silicon Valley. Though Solana has since moved to Miami, his fiercest ire on Pirate Wires remains fixed on San Francisco's liberal politicians. A sampling of recent headlines, how San Francisco attracts and traps homeless transplants, how San Francisco's DEI industrial complex works, and inside San Francisco public schools' shocking health curriculum. All In has similarly taken aim at figures including Fauci, George Soros, Joe Biden, and a host of California politicians. It's interesting to see how this sentiment, this anti-regime sentiment, arose among the tech community with respect to San Francisco. And the more that they're coming out against the regime, the more the regime is resembling San Francisco. There's a clear indicator that they are now trapped in mimetic rivalry with one another. In 2022, when David Sachs was personally bankrolling the recall of the San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin, he and the other All In hosts goaded listeners to support recalling Boudin and Governor Gavin Newsom in exchange for personal shoutouts on the show. Based. Emboldened by this chorus of combativeness, many of the pro-tech media's luminaries and disciples are taking its agenda into the real world. Quote, if you have a belief and you see it in Pirate Wires, maybe you can bring it up at your company's all hands, John Coogan says. Or if you're management, you can use the pro-tech media to tell your underlings to get with the program. So they're saying we should begin acting as if we are governing these institutions rather than sitting back and letting the Longhouse govern us. In November of 2022, a week after Elon Musk took over Twitter and laid off half its staff, a vice president encouraged concerned remaining staffers to listen to All In. Quote, the most recent podcast covers the current layoffs happening across tech and provides some insight into why this is happening / necessary, the VP wrote, according to reporting from Casey Newton. Or you can take the pro-tech media to City Hall. At a recent meeting of San Francisco's Board of Supervisors, a woman lambasted a city initiative that redistributed $120 million in police funding to black communities by citing a lengthy quote from a Pirate Wires screed against the, quote, historical racial equity cash grab. $120 million in police funding in San Francisco. Like, I remember hearing numbers that were this size in respect to the federal government. I'm old enough to remember that when we're talking about like new budget initiatives and stuff and talking in terms of like the hundreds of millions. Now we're talking about a city government and one initiative. Perhaps most significantly, the pro-tech media has begun to influence the national political agenda. In June, the All In host, Palpatine and Sachs, hosted an up to $300,000 a head fundraiser for Trump's re-election campaign at Sachs's $20 million home in San Francisco, an event that once would have been unimaginable in the city. Trump went on to be treated to a fawning interview on the podcast, and Sachs went on to speak at the Republican National Convention, where the Peter Thiel protege J.D. Vance was named Trump's pick for vice president. Obviously, this chick has a bone to pick with these people. This is being written as a hit piece, but like a fawning interview, that's an honest way to describe it. Like they were, you know, they were professional, but they were very deferential. They had a relationship to tech, a relationship to authority that is proper. Like even if you disagree with them, even if you like don't see eye to eye or whatever, you have a social obligation as a human being to be deferential to those who are in authority. And they were that way, and you could consider it fawning. And I don't think that's a critique. Of the members of the news media I talked to about pro-tech media, some were backhandedly laudatory. Quote, Mike Solana is a talented guy on a number of levels, some of them nefarious, Brian Merchant, a tech columnist who wrote the book Blood in the Machine, The Origins of the Rebellion Against Big Tech, said. Quote, both in politically playing the game to get funding for his projects and also in being an effective asshole writer who can get attention on the internet. Close quote. Others exhibited the same instinct to, quote, go direct to their audiences as tech entrepreneurs. When I asked the Semaphore founder Ben Smith for an interview, he wrote back, quote, super interesting topic, but I'd rather compete with you on this one than be a pundit. Others were cautiously enthusiastic. Quote, why should journalists own the ethical obligation of informing people about the world, said Eric Newcomer, a reporter who left Bloomberg in 2020 to start a Substack covering the tech industry. Tech is oriented in a good way around productive solutions, but when it comes to the media, they've just been whining and abrogating responsibility. So if these people say we could do news better, well, good. Let them figure it out. Some early pro-tech media ventures have already figured out that even the most avid enthusiasts will retreat from bland propaganda, no matter how sleekly packaged. Andreessen Horowitz publication Future, for example, launched in 2021 with a string of high-profile editorial hires and a glitzy website touting itself as the future of media. It failed to gain a loyal readership and shut down after just 18 months. And even with moneyed backers, high-profile connections, and a bravado that captures the tech industry zeitgeist, building a successful media company in 2024 is a steep challenge. Media's, quote, business model is just completely fucked, Solana says. As advertising dollars dry up for publishers, he's been toying with different strategies for monetization. Still, Pirate Wire's $20 a month subscription fee is a steep price for what subscribers get. The site tends to stagnate, with several days often passing between single posts. Solana still assigns, edits, and writes the majority of the site's content. Quote, the truth is I have 2 full-time jobs right now, and it's absolutely miserable, he said. Perhaps tellingly, he has no plans to leave Founders Fund anytime soon. I can relate to this guy more than anyone can imagine. And it's funny the way she's framing this too, because relating to this guy, the $20 a month subscription fee is a steep price. What that means, if you have a high subscription fee, that means you're looking for serious subscribers. You're not looking for pain in the ass tire kickers. I have, in every single industry where I have sold anything, the people who buy the least, who spend the least amount of money, are the most annoying. They demand the most attention. They want the most for their money. And they're the constant squeaky wheel. The people who pay the most, like the people who pay sums of money you wouldn't fathom, are the ones who are easily the most accommodating, friendly, easy to get along with, want the least from you. When I was working with Jason Stapleton, we were doing consulting for business owners. We found this to be the case. People would sign up for some of his services, and they would pay for like the bare minimum thing, and then they'd get in and be, oh, why isn't there this? Why isn't there other thing? What about this thing? And I want that thing. And then there'd be the people who would hop on a call, and they'd be like, yeah, I want to sign up for this. How much is it? And I'd be like, it's X thousands of dollars. And they'd be like, okay, cool. Is there any way that I can pay more and get more? Like, is there other things that I can buy as well? And then they would be like, okay, I want one meeting a month. I've got 30 minutes. Let's sit down. Let's get through all this stuff, and then let's get on with our day. Whereas the people who would pay, $47 a month or whatever would be like, oh, I need this thing and give me this other thing. And not everyone, but the people who complained were always the ones who paid the least amount of money. So when he has this subscription fee set this way, number one, he's filtering for high class, high quality audience, a high class, high quality audience. And then what this means is, say it was $5 a month instead, which if it was $5 a month, then she would be saying, oh, the fact that he's making people pay for this is blah, 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 blah. You're not going to win with this person. It was $5 a month. That means for every subscriber that he gets at $20 a month, he would need 4 subscribers at $5 a month. So he's going to get more of a lower quality to get the same amount of he's got to get more people who are of a lower quality to get the same level of income. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But then you get the fucking commies who complain and whine about it. These are the people that Mike Solana and his ilk are completely fed up with. Because he goes into his day job and he's doing serious work. Running major companies, managing major investments. The dude's busy. He's busy making major decisions. Decisions that have significant import on the future lives of lots of different people. And he's going to come sit here and have this like side hustle where he just spits his thoughts out. And then this naggy little harpy is going to come over and bitch at him because he's charging too much money. He's like, fuck off. Just go away. Go play in a sandbox somewhere or something and let me work. Still, as mistrust in traditional media remains high and readers flock to more identity-focused brands, these projects will likely only gain traction and play an increasingly important role in shaping how the tech industry sees itself and perceives its enemies. Lulu Chang Maservi, who I read a tweet from on the after the CrowdStrike event, the CrowdStrike CEO, she was the one, she's like a PR expert who critiqued his statement. She's a very good follow on Twitter. Lulu Chang Maservi, a communications expert who has worked extensively with tech founders, told me that when she talks to entrepreneurs about the publications they'd most like to be covered in these days, quote, they will usually say the information in Bloomberg, but also Pirate Wires or John Coogan, close quote. More and more, tech's elite are following Balaji Srinivasan's advice in a recent Pirate Wires interview. Quote, don't fucking talk to journalists, close quote, and going to the pro-tech media to set the agenda. But their success comes with an irony. The more they multiply, the more they're starting to act like the media outlets they despise, shamelessly vying for attention and edge in branding. Yep, because that's how it works. On June 30, Solana posted a 3,000-word essay called, quote, We Are the Media Now, that set his sights on a new target, his rising competition in the pro-tech media. He took on an uncharacteristically defensive tone, listing Pirate Wire's bona fides against the rest of the field. Quote, I wrote about San Francisco local politics when the subject was somehow both considered silly and mean. Today, that discourse is a core part of tech culture, close quote. He ended with a message for, quote, every billionaire in tech looking to start their own media company. Quote, the good news is that you don't need to build an edgy new tech press outlet that doesn't want communism. I already did that. You're welcome, close quote. Solana seems keenly aware of this development. The truth is, he told me recently, deploying one of his favorite phrases, the unfortunate truth, by the way, is that I think I've become a journalist, and I don't love the feeling. There is layers to that one, man. All right. Hopefully hopefully you guys find that as I don't know, as insightful and encouraging and interesting as I do. Point proven, the writer is paying $0 and is still complaining. Yeah, right. Catching up on some of the comments here. Yeah, Trump has big tech support, so obviously they have to be like, hey guys, us too. Colin Rosh says, there's a good reason I'm not anywhere near the lowest price contractor. Yes, right. Should always charge the most you possibly can for your services. Like the lady complaining about Costco membership fees. Yeah, indeed. There's a rabbit hole in itself. All right, speaking of the rising little tech Silicon Valley guys, and their war with the media, David Sachs says, Google search results used to be biased. Now they're completely rigged. Final step will be AI, where history will be rewritten in real time to serve the narrative. So if you search for Donald Trump, you get Kamala Harris rally in Atlanta, and you get Project 2025 Donald Trump critical stuff. Try it for yourself. He says, here are the results this morning. Well, first of all, let's see, 613,000 impressions. Here are the results this morning. If you search for Trump, you get positive stories about Harris and the latest attack on Trump. If you search for Harris, you just get positive stories. This has to be programmed. Is Google making an in-kind contribution to the Harris campaign? State AGs need to open lawsuits immediately on this obvious case of election interference. And I fully agree. Like Ken Paxton, you've been stacking up the W's lately. Let's dive into this one. Hit them from all sides. Give them so much shit to deal with. You're going to be giving them ammunition to campaign against, but you've got to absolutely fucking just drown them in it. Cripple them with lawfare, litigation, bad press. Just hit them from all sides. Expose all of the dirty laundry. You've got probably hundreds, if not thousands of people. And if you count all of the unpaid anons on the internet, there's potentially maybe even millions who can be at work generating content designed to go viral and coordinated to go viral, lobbing it up to our aspirational patrons here. Just lob them softballs to amplify and begin coordinating with the legal apparatus. Because there's all of these guys, all these Republican squishes. The reason it's easy for them to be squishes is because they're not going to get anywhere near enough heat for taking for not taking an anti-regime posture. They don't get enough heat for it. You can sit around and complain, oh, these guys are just useless and they don't ever do anything, and they're just there cashing their checks and they're containment and they're the outer party performing its function, or you can fucking put the heat on them. Make it uncomfortable for them to not take the anti-regime posture and not start going after them for this kind of stuff. A $1.4 billion settlement with Meta is a big fucking deal. That's a win that needs to be stacked upon. Shout out to Ken Paxton. I think we got something with Ken Paxton coming here in a minute. Actually, yeah, I'll just hit it right now. You've got breaking news. Another big win for Texas under Ken Paxton. The Biden-Harris injunction against the border buoys has been lifted. Texas can keep them in place. Now is the time to deploy more. So this was the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of Texas and against the federal government. Another big win. Okay, we got a new one. We got a new James O'Keefe video. I haven't watched the whole thing. We'll watch enough of it as seems interesting, and then we'll ripcord out of it if it gets boring. Could be early, could be middle, could be late. We'll see. Breaking, DNC manager. I don't think Kamala Harris would win. Admits to making empty promises to donors. Now, this one's going to start making your skin crawl quick here. Quote, I don't think Kamala Harris would win this year, reveals Joyce DeCerce, him, compliance manager for the Democratic National Committee and Kamala Harris's campaign. DeCerce adds, she doesn't have any accomplishments to speak of, suggests that Harris's lack of popularity stems from her underachievement while in office. So we're going to come down and we're going to watch this. This is a him named Joyce. I tweeted that I don't want to know what James O'Keefe is doing to get these scoops. We're going to speed this up.
I like Kamala Harris, but I don't think she'd win this year.
Meet Joyce DeCerce, him, the compliance manager to the DNC.
What's your official title?
Compliance manager. My specific job, like the end all be all of my job, is reporting to the government how much the DNC raised and where.
How much the DNC raised? I'm the compliance manager. Hey guys, I'm compliance manager. I get to manage the compliance. What do you do? Oh, I manage the money that's raised. Oh, okay. I see. So Joyce, him, the compliance manager. He manages the compliance. He's the guy who manages the money.
It's money.
Saying that she doesn't have any accomplishments to speak of.
She's weirdly unpopular. She doesn't have any accomplishments to speak of because she's vice president.
Joyce DeCerce revealed how the DNC gains donations and what tactics they use, including just telling donors what they want them to hear.
When I was doing finance, like fundraising, we just call it finance and politics, you kind of tell a donor what they want to hear.
Which one?
Whatever they want to hear.
DeCerce admits to the OMG citizen journalist American Swiper, you kind of tell a donor just what they want to hear.
You just put on a performance button, a little show, right?
You just put on a performance for them, a little show, right?
There's multiple meetings here. This is a different place than the last one was. So this place is definitely not this place. What in the hell is wrong with these people? How are they going on multiple lunch meetings with some journalist or something and just spilling the beans? It's almost hard to believe. There's something weird going on. Pete Quinones says, now we know how Koresh would have looked like as a tranny. Buck Johnson said, as gross as this is, it's a white pill for sure. He, him, so menacing. Yeah, this is your enemies right here. This is the enemy regime. These are the vote fixers.
Show, right?
You just put on a performance for them, a little show, right?
So basically, we're just feeding into their fantasy.
Yeah. Which, given that a rich person, they want their fantasy be, fed.
So we just take their money and we like smile and nod our head, but like we don't really take their opinions into our strategy.
100%.
So some donors are holding back on writing their checks because they think that the campaign's not doing well. Why would they think that?
I don't know, a lot of people think we should attack Trump more.
We should just attack Trump more.
Yeah.
Do you feel like our strategy has always been just like take their money and tell them what they want to hear?
Yeah, that's politics.
So it sounds like the person who's there is like interviewing for a position or something. I don't know if maybe that's how they're getting in. Is there, you have someone that's he's a manager, so he's doing like an interview here, but you could tell he's like, oh, let's get into some gossip. Let's do some gossip, guys. Oh, I get to talk about it. I'm on the inside. Oh, I know all the tea. Just listen to me and I will tell you about all the tea.
There's always been an artifice that pervades our politics in this country, with people never willing to say out loud what the truth is. And the political marketing industry, masquerading as journalists, participate in that.
Magoo says, I mean, we could see his face. He would give up anything to any e-thought that sent him a smiley emoji. Yeah, I don't want to see this guy's Craigslist personals posting history. I don't need to know.
Lie. But every once in a while, we manage to catch them being honest. And when we do, they tell you the truth, what they really think, what they really believe, what they won't say in public for reasons that are themselves important. And they tell you things like this.
And what's your official title?
Compliance manager.
You're the only person.
Yeah. I don't manage anyone.
I mean, you manage compliance.
Manage
It's huge,
compliance,
right? I mean, like there's a lot of legality involved. I
I
imagine.
can't say like I manage the compliance department because
Yeah.
I don't. There's no department to manage. I manage me.
And remind me what compliance means again.
It's pretty much an accounting function. It's kind of like where accounting and legal meet. So
So you report.
yeah, my specific job, like the end-all be-all of my job is reporting to the government how much the DNC raised and where it spent its money.
Oh my God. There is no compliance department. I am compliance. I manage me. What do? My job is to report to the federal government how much money the DNC raised and where it spends its money. So the entire DNC, it's all of its operations and everything, all of its different accessories and proxies that they would need to be held legally accountable for. All of that gets funneled through this guy. And this guy winds up sitting here at a lunch meeting with someone, just spilling the beans on camera. And these people are supposed to be like the great, awesome power that is going to be able to project power across the entire globe and manage some globalized Skynet state. It's preposterous. These people cannot govern. They must be removed from governing roles because there's such a incredible conglomeration of incompetence and malevolence. They cannot be allowed to govern anything. This is like comic book villain level stupid and incompetent. That you would build this entire apparatus and you would be so plainly corrupt and have such a massive gaping void in your great master plans as to funnel compliance with the federal government on financial reporting through this guy alone. He's probably overselling his role. I'm sure there's probably other people. But this is just staggering.
And Joe Biden's campaign right now because they don't have anyone doing that for them. So
Also, you're doing it for both the DNC and the Biden campaign.
yeah.
Meet Joyce DeSears, he, him, the compliance manager to the DNC in the former Biden campaign, now the Kamala Harris campaign. DeSears, as stated on his LinkedIn, is a, quote, political operations expert with experience in people and culture, financial operations, and compliance. DeSears divulged further into what his role description is for the DNC, the former Biden campaign, and now the Kamala Harris campaign. In today's rapidly evolving healthcare landscape and mysterious shortages of medical...
Javier, why do you know that? Why do you know that, sir? You should not know that. No one needs to know that. Colin Ross says, someone who looks like this has no self-control and cannot even govern themselves. Indeed, as is performatively demonstrated.
supplies, being proactive about your health is paramount. That's why our OMG supporters, the wellness scum crafted by the field, we second actions, save features for medication, and save $15 medications control of their health journey. So order TW/OMG two-part series investigation of the Democratic National Committee and the newly established Vice President Kamala Harris's presidential campaign. Americans across the country are just a few short months away from electing a new president of the United States in what has already been an insane campaign cycle, and the election is just around the corner. Here at OMG, we decided to investigate and found ourselves looking at the Democratic National Committee, the Joe Biden campaign, and now the Kamala Harris presidential campaign. Let's dive right in. Joyce DeSears, the DNC compliance manager, met our OMG American swiper on the dating app Bumble, where they met on multiple occasions. He spoke to the journalist about the DNC, Vice President Harris, President Joe Biden, First Lady Jill Biden. Recently, Vice President Kamala Harris has launched her campaign for President of the United States. What does the DNC compliance manager, Joyce DeSears, him, think of Kamala running? Well, he confided to our own...
I love how he just keeps saying Joyce DeSears, him. He's on a date! Jeez.
OMG journalist about the fears of the vice president losing to Donald Trump, revealing Kamala Harris has no accomplishments to run on, saying, quote, I don't think Kamala Harris would win this year, and saying that she doesn't have any accomplishments to speak of. He even goes so far as to say that Kamala Harris won't win even if she ran in 2028.
I like Kamala Harris, but I don't think she'd win this year.
Why?
She's weirdly unpopular. I think a lot of that is racism and misogyny. And the vice president's so easy to attack, right? She doesn't have any accomplishments to speak of because she's vice president. She doesn't make laws. Her job is to become...
She doesn't... Oh, listen to this rationalization. She doesn't have any accomplishments because she's just the vice president. She couldn't. She was hindered by being vice president. She wasn't able to accomplish anything. I bet you this becomes an angle. This is how Joe Biden gets thrown under the bus. This is all the things you wanted from Joe. I wanted to give those things to you, but Joe was, he just wasn't all there. And, we really respected him and wanted him to be able to stick it out. But, I was the real mastermind behind things here, but my hands were tied because I didn't have the support of the rest of the White House. And, oh, man, this could get really interesting.
President that Joe Biden does. And a lot of the time, the vice president, whoever they are, gets sent to do the hard stuff. So, yeah.
So why do you think she's constantly getting attacked?
Honestly, if you look at the stuff people attack her with, it is a bunch of racist, sexist bullshit. Like, it's just stuff you wouldn't say about a man. People call her ditzy.
It's truly shocking what people admit when you use a hidden camera. The undercover cameras you've seen us use in the past are now available for sale. Go to our website, o'keefemediagroup.com, click on Covert Camera Store, go get the footage, send it to us, and we'll pay you for it. Joyce
Oh, this is amazing. Oh, this is like the basketball player that goes up for a dunk and just absolutely drags his nuts across their face. He's like, look, this is the stuff we're using. You want to use it? Recruiting the entire audience. Hey, here's the equipment. Go do it yourself. Get to work. There's a good point here from Meta. He says, how do guys who look that bad not realize anyone worth going on a date with them is clearly trying to play them? This is where, so the regime, this like antinatalist, degenerate, satanic regime has been cultivating sexual incompetence. Just complete degeneracy and people that don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. Then there's many levels to that now that I say it. This is it coming around to bite them in the ass, which some of them would probably enjoy. They've cultivated complete sexual incompetence, and now you've got this absolute loser who thinks he's hot shit, and this woman is just playing him like a fiddle. It's a cautionary tale to our guys as well. Because there's definitely some of our guys who need to wisen up in the sexual market, so the sexual marketplace. Let this guy be a cautionary tale to you. It's very easy to get played by a woman in a lot of different ways when you're a desperate, low confidence man. You want to get yourself out of that desperate, low confidence state because you are vulnerable.
Sears, him, is saying what everyone else is apparently thinking. Even Vice President Harris's own Democratic employees are acknowledging she cannot win due to her unpopularity and lack of accomplishments. Recall the video that I did undercover, sitting across the table from someone in the executive office of the White House.
Same thing with Kamala Harris. She's not popular, but you can't remove the first black lady to be vice president from the goddamn presidential ticket. She can't.
This is the guy we've talked about before. JS says, real talk, genius move to sell those cameras. Dude is making his software open source. Yes. He's open sourcing investigative journalism. Anti-regime investigative journalism. Patchwork says that the tone she uses to ask those questions sounds more journalistic than date-like. Yeah, like I'm sure she's probably picking up on the fact that this guy is a dim bulb. She doesn't even have to like try to like bat her eyes at him or flirt with him like James O'Keefe did. She's badgering him with questions, and he's just like, "Oh yes, ma'am. Oh yeah. Oh, I have to respect all women. She's asking me a question. I must answer the question." Completely battered into a corner. He's so pathetic. Yeah, Magoo, listen to me. Meta Prime says the three-letter agencies long knew that letting gays and losers in was going to be an infosec nightmare, but they had to now that degens are the only people still invested in the regime. That's a really good point.
Keep white staff. They quit on her in mass.
Just a short time ago, Vice President Kamala Harris launched her presidential bid and raised $81 million in 24 hours, according to an Axios report. Joyce DeSears revealed how the DNC gains donations and what tactics they use, including just telling donors what they want them to hear and playing into what DeSears calls Democratic donors' fantasies in order to get more money.
When I was doing finance, like fundraising, we just call finance and politics, you kind of tell a donor what they want to
We just call it finance and politics. Yeah. This guy totally thinks that he's like a character on the West Wing.
hear.
Which is what?
Whatever they want to hear. They tell you what they tell you what they want to hear, and then they say, "What do you think?"
Give me an example.
You know, we really need to spend more attacking Trump.
Sure.
You need to get up on stage and you need to talk about all the things Trump is saying. And then you say, "I completely agree," and President Biden is going to be doing that. Here's 3 examples where he did it. And if we have 25K, we can spend money on making sure that happens. Can you give 25K? And he's like, "I don't know." And you're like, "Well, you know, Biden actually has an event coming up. I could relay your concerns to him. You know what? Yeah, I'll give 50K. Okay." But then donor says, "You're doing way too many TV ads. You know, like TV doesn't change votes. You know, that nobody wants cable anymore." Well, that's why we're hiring so many organizers in all these states. The organizers cost money, and so just a single organizer's salary is $41,000 a year. And we gotta hire a lot if we really want to beat Trump and be competitive and say, "What state are you from again? Florida?" We need to really have a lot of organizers if we want to beat Trump in Florida. In fact, we're opening up a field office right there in Tampa. It's going to cost a lot. Can you give 100K?
Dang, you're good.
You just
I'm ready to like write a check to you.
you tell people exactly what they want to hear, though.
DeSears admits to the OMG citizen journalist American Swiper, you kind of tell a donor just what they want to hear. You just put on a performance for them, a little show, right?
Do you feel like our strategy has always been just like take their money and tell them what they want to hear?
Yeah, that's politics.
That's what?
That's politics.
That's politics? So we just take their money and we like smile and nod our head, but like we don't really take their opinions into our strategy?
100%.
So basically we're just feeding into their fantasy.
Yeah. Which, you ever met a rich person?
No.
You can see in this guy is the greatest conglomeration of ironies imaginable. He sees himself as the little guy. He's like the pure innocent little guy who's being dirtied by politics. Like that's politics. Like that's how it works. This is just, you know, when you're in the game, when you're on the hill, like this is just politics. This is just how it is. You ever met a rich person? You know how they are, those scummy rich people that just own the whole game. When he's literally describing how you just tell them what they want to hear and then take their money and go do what you want with it. Every single one of the people within the regime does not see themselves as the regime. The regime is not made up of people who recognize they're in a regime. Each one of them sees themselves as an underdog, as someone who's just being swept along by forces much greater than themselves. It's an entire organism made up of people who don't know that they are making up an organism. So the organism has its own consciousness independent of the consciousness of the individual members within it.
That's their MO.
What?
They want their fantasy to be, you know, fed. You just put on a performance for it in a little show, right? Judith Butler calls this phantasm.
Phantasm.
Yeah, it's this kind of like cognitive dissonance of like just imagining something that truly isn't.
So some donors are holding back on writing the checks because they think that the campaign's not doing well? Why would they think that?
I don't know, a lot of people think we should attack Trump more.
We should attack Trump more.
Yeah.
Do you feel like our strategy has always been just like take their money and tell them what they want to hear?
Yeah, that's politics.
So, there you have it. DeSears sings like a canary about how he uses facades to play to donors' fantasies, utilizing deception. It's on full display over at the DNC. But it begs the question, what else is the DNC doing to trick their donors or voters? How many other people agree with this man? In fact, how many people disagree with him? Really? And why are they telling donors what they want to hear? Why aren't they telling them the truth? Why are they performing these bait and switch techniques? On top of all of this, our OMG American Sniper asked Joyce DeSears about President Biden and his struggles with donors, which corroborates reports in the media that have stated Biden was, in fact, struggling with campaign donations.
So do you think it was a mistake that President Biden agreed to debate Trump?
No, because I think it was a good thing on Biden's part because he would have had to debate Trump anyway, just politically. He would have had to.
I mean, I just imagine how he does in the debates gonna influence how donors decide whether they're going to continue to back him, right?
For sure. Yeah, we've had people who haven't wanted to give us money because they think the campaign is not doing well enough or Biden isn't being strong enough.
We reached out to the DNC for comment and to DeSears for comment, and we received this. Now, what's interesting is the DNC did try contacting our fearless OMG American swiper, including sending her this postcard asking her not to do any more online swiping. The postcard was in English and Chinese. We're not sure why they invoked an Asian racial undertone in contacting our journalist. They also made anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night. To her, this all happened as the publication date of our groundbreaking story on the DNC approach. It appears as though these are attempts to intimidate or try to stop this report from being aired. But here at OMG, we are undeterred, always holding those in power accountable. And once again, we extol the brave journalist, the virtues of this swiper who got this story. She's incredibly talented and courageous, and we're sending her a check for the story. And you can do the same. O'KeefeMediaGroup.com/swiper. Our staff is standing by. We'll get in touch with those who qualify and sign up on our website. We want to create an army of you to make what we do unstoppable. Now to our audience.
Man, these guys know what they're doing. I think O'Keefe is a bit of a goofball, and I don't know if that's because he's a goofball, because he's really just he's an operator, and he's an operator that's forced to be the face for the operation, and so he's just kind of a goofball publicly, or if it's that he's kind of a goofball and he's just the face for an operation that has the real operators behind it. It's one of those two. Either way, these people know how to build an effective organization.
So we have many insiders, some on the DNC, some inside Act Blue, and some people are unknowing insiders and unwitting whistleblowers because they're talking to someone they don't know as a journalist. If you're on the inside of the DNC, or the Kamala Harris campaign, and notice corruption, lying, stealing, or cheating, we urge you to come forward and speak truth to power. Contact us on Signal at 914-315-9415. DM us on social media. We've gotten thousands of messages. We try to read all of them, and we will have an OMG journalist be in touch with you. Or, of course, join our swiper campaign. You'll get paid to do stories like this. Later this week, we will release the next installment of the DNC tapes, where we investigate a topic of money regarding DNC and disbursements. Really gray areas here, possible illegal activity, possible legal loopholes. We'll investigate that. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and stay tuned. It is up to citizen journalists like you and I.
This is as much of a cornball as he is. This is a valuable service that he's providing, and crowdsourcing it is brilliant. The way they've set it up, this is weaponizing social media against the regime. Because what this does now, it's not guaranteed to work because it's going to require cooperation from other people. But what this does is it provides for a pretext for putting pressure to amplifying these stories, revealing all the corruption and putting them under pressure, giving them PR things to have to manage, throwing tons of shit on their plate. And then it can even become a pretext for sussing out actual criminal activity and forming some type of an audit of the DNC, or there's so many different angles that it can go. But it requires people congealing around a narrative and forcing that narrative, cramming that narrative into reality to actually mobilize some of the people who can actually wield power, whether it's Republican representatives in Congress who are willing to do something but are just going to be held hostage by public opinion, and you have to sway that public opinion. In any case, this is the sort of thing that becomes one node on a larger network of things, along with Robbie Starbuck and Chris Rufo. All of these guys are doing good work. That thing in itself is not going to turn the tide. And you get all the naysayers and the black pillars who they'll critique them for being they're not politically their political philosophy is too lib-like. You know, James O'Keefe is kind of a goofball. Robbie Starbuck is very kind of millennial con, which is like a weird derivation of boomer con. And Chris Rufo is who's probably the most dissident right adjacent of all of these different types of guys. Even he's still I think he's probably a Zionist and is just kind of like a default conservative with sort of dissident, edgy leanings. But the stuff that they're doing is absolutely, if nothing else, throwing a whole bunch of shit at the regime, making them defend themselves and go to war on all these different fronts. That's what's characterized this regime from its inception, is that it's going to wage war with everyone on every front at every time possible. So the way you burn it out is you make it fight too many wars on too many fronts to where it just cannibalizes its own resources and drives people out of its coalition to where it just kind of collapses. And the question is really whether it's going to just completely fracture and collapse Venezuela style, or if it's going to be caught in the middle of that and just transitioned. And it's going to have a lot of it's going to resemble a lot the old world, but it's going to have a very new bent to it. It'll give formal lip service to a lot of the old world things, but it's going to function very much in a new world way. I think that's really the debate. And I would prefer the latter. I don't want Venezuela-style collapse here. That's when the regime just completely tanks. I don't even know if that's possible in the United States, honestly. I think there's a reason that sort of thing for the last several decades has only happened in effectively third world or even some first world countries, but even then it's still not going full-blown Venezuela. I think that might be something that the current first world just isn't capable of experiencing. However, that's the sort of thing that can change on a dime, and I don't really want to play with that, gamble with that part of history. One thing here, shout out to Josh Ham, a story he shared. He said, this feels like a momentous shift in the Overton window of acceptable demographics to market towards. He's quote tweeting Matt Walsh, who says, excellent analysis here, quote tweeting a Steve Deese tweet. Matt Walsh says, the Republicans telling you that we can win by mobilizing the black vote are either fantastically stupid or they're lying to your face. It isn't going to happen, and the numbers conclusively prove that. So Steve Deese, this is very much worth listening to. 16 minutes long. I'm not going to play it here. But Steve Deese goes through the numbers from back to like 1996 to 2008, somewhere starting with the elections then, because that's when we have the best polling numbers. And even then, the polling numbers aren't great. But he compares the percentage of the vote that is the black vote, the percentage of the vote that the Republicans, of the black vote that the Republicans have gotten. And then he does the woman vote, the married vote, and a couple, and he kind of parses those numbers together, figures out how to put those numbers together, showing that Trump will rise and fall with the white vote. What percentage of the different subsets of the white vote he gets? White male working class vote, white woman vote, white married woman vote. It's going to be the white votes are what are going to decide it for him. This is something that's been completely off limits to be talked about in normie conservative circles. But here we've got Steve Deese and Matt Walsh now signal boosting this message. So it's gonna start picking up some steam. This is going to make a dent. This is going to be a narrative that persists. Now, one of the things we mentioned in the past was on the show here was that the way that the absolute state of white people right now, there is a visceral knee-jerk response away from a white people's party. There's a paradox in here where white people, you have to appeal to white people to get them to feel comfortable voting for Trump. But if you appeal to them too directly, you're going to push them away because they've been trained and conditioned to pull away from something like that. Which is why I think that it's not a universally bad thing to be doing these open, patronizing overtures to the black community or the Hispanic community. Because the way white people are, by and large today, they want to be part of a multi-ethnic coalition. So if you want their vote in a cynical sense, pandering to minorities is actually a way to get their vote. Now, you can't do that exclusively. You can't completely bury into all we're going to do is just pander to minorities. You need to actually, the time is right to be able to pair that together now with more open overtures to, you could use dog whistles too, like families, which is J.D. Vance. Basically, every hit piece on him now talks about how he's advocating for families. So families, marriage, children, some of these are proxies for the demographics that you're looking for. This is a complicated political line to walk because you have to, with the current state of things, you have to appeal to the white people without making the white people feel like you're trying to appeal to white people. In the future, depending on how, like either way this election goes, the next time around, if there is a next time around, it's going to be much more normalized. People are going to be much more comfortable with that for a lot of obvious reasons. But this is good. We're seeing the normie-cons beginning to echo some of these talking points, which again shows the mainstream conversation is downstream from us. Apparently, it's pronounced Steve Dace. See, I've been aware of who he is. I've only ever seen him on Twitter. Never watched his show. That's literally the first time that I've ever watched him. Was when I watched that video. Actually, it's pronounced lame, but I get your point. Yeah, see, I've never really felt like there was much reason to watch him. I went through my, my Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder kind of phase, and then moved on away from Normicons after that. So I didn't really expand out in the Normicon world. Okay, another little headline here. Sagari says a majority of men under 30 support former President Trump and Republican control of Congress, a sharp reversal from the 2020 race. Young women strongly favor Democrats. She said this also explains much of the weird wars. Wall Street Journal finds that most young men find trans ideology weird and repellent. Vice versa for abortion with young women. What issues people find repellent is increasingly gender-driven. So responsibility is landing more and more on the shoulders of men because women are being driven further and further from them. So here's the numbers. On the congressional ballot, in 2020, women were, let's see here. How do I read this? Women went from 50%. Why is it going down? Women went from 50% to 60% Democrat. And Republicans went from, okay, I don't know if I'm having a moment of the retards here, but I can't understand what's happening. Okay, so this is women, Democrat, Republican. Okay, so women went from 50% Democrat to 60% Democrat, but I don't see what percent Republican they were. This is 26 now. I don't know what they were before. I guess 50-50. It's obvious. Okay, duh. Now they're 60-26. So they've gone sharply Democrat. Men, on the flip side, have gone the opposite direction. On the presidential ballot, it's been the same thing. So the election is very obviously going to turn in terms of the actual votes, the way the votes come in, is very obviously going to turn on the performance of like married white women. That may be the single demographic that decides everything. So a little update on one of the stories we talked about yesterday. Andrew Torba got a signal boost from the fearless leader of the town square himself. Elon says it sure looks like the FBI leadership engaged in perjury. These are strong terms. The FBI leadership engaged in perjury. Now, there's a lot of ways this can go. This could just be a blip and it, everyone moves on and nobody pays any attention to it. This could also be a pretext being established for lawfare. And relatedly, you remember, you guys, we played the video a couple weeks ago of Corey Mills, representative from Florida, talking about the J13 Commission. That was the first place I heard someone use the term J13 Commission. I was like, oh, that's good. That's good. So it says, just in, Corey Mills, a former Army combat vet who Speaker Johnson refused to put on the Trump assassination attempt task force, has now pledged to fund a parallel independent investigation. Mills has already been on the ground in Butler, Pennsylvania, investigating with Eli Crane, who is a representative from Arizona, and Benny Johnson. So Benny Johnson obviously has close ties to Vivek and other people in the alternative right-wing media space. And you've got a couple of Republican representatives who are looking into this. I really liked that video. It's the first I'd ever seen or heard of Corey Mills. It was one interview with CNN, and I thought he struck a very appropriate tone. He's got an interesting background. He's a military contractor. And I reached out to someone who would know and to get an idea of what's Corey Mills about. And the answer I got back was, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. So this will be interesting to watch. We're seeing the J13 Commission. The regime has put together its Trump assassination attempt task force, which is a Warren Commission, obviously, an effort to kill the story off. And this is going to be, if there is going to be an actual investigation, it's going to have to happen through these guys. These guys, and probably the role they're going to have to play is They're not ever going to be recognized as an official investigation, and they're going to be fighting lawfare every step of the way. So they're going to need funding and they're going to need publicity. And they're going to be pulling stories out using people like James O'Keefe, potentially, or people doing similar things, pull these stories out and amplify them. The way Robbie Starbuck has done with going after the major companies, trying to de-wokeify the companies, and the way that Chris Rufo has gone after bureaucrats and educators and such things. So this is a Javier. Yes, that's exactly who it was. This is if there is to be a J13 commission, it's going to be because these guys force it to happen. Related story. Got one last thing here on election types of things, and then we're going to pivot to the creepiest piece of technology that I've ever seen developed that absolutely represents the dark side of the tech bro universe. Got a couple of comments on that from some people, and then a thing about JD Vance and at a gun show. I got a thread that's interesting about Venezuela. We're going to talk about the fourth turning. We're going to talk about AI, and then I'm going to read through a thread of mine, and I want to read through this thing from Charles Haywood. I don't know if we'll have time, but we'll see. This might end up just being a long show. But before we get to that, let's go through this thing about this Secret Service counter sniper. So that's not the right tab. Here's the right tab. So this woman, Susan Crabtree, has been thrust into the spotlight a little bit recently because she was a writer for Real Clear Politics, White House and national political correspondent. Has written for The Hill, Roll Call, and Washington Examiner. She's got an encrypted email, so she's looking for whistleblowers or sources who want to come out. And she wrote a piece in, I think it was in 2020, about Mark Kelly, the senator, I believe, from Arizona, who was a NASA astronaut, supposedly, and and is one of the rumored vice presidential candidates for Kamala. So the story was that Barack Obama wanted him to actually be the nominee, and we could still end up hearing from him in that capacity in some sense. But she'd written a story about how he was involved with a Chinese company and remember the Chinese spy balloon, that he was involved in a company setting those sorts of things up, major national security risk implications on it. And she had done this whole story and expose on it in 2020 or 2021, and nobody ever picked it up. Now, suddenly, it got picked up and revived like 3-4 years later. And she said the people who are reviving it are Democrats who do not want Mark Kelly, because for whatever they want their own guy. You've got Josh Shapiro, you've got the guy from North Carolina, I think, Roy Cooper, which I think he just withdrew his name. You got Gretchen Whitmer, you got Pete Buttigieg. These all represent different factions who are vying for power. They're very disorganized right now. She'll pick Shapiro because she has to win Pennsylvania. Yeah, I think that's the direction that it'll go. At the same time, this is an interesting tidbit I got on watching the All In podcast the other day. David Friedberg said that he was aware of a very large organization recently that was having an election for the chair of the board, and the existing chair was Jewish. And he was basically pressured to step down and be replaced because he was Jewish. This is the reason he was given. That the political climate is not appropriate right now where they could afford the risk of having a Jewish chair of the board. And of course, they were hand-wringing about this, that this is awful. They can't imagine that we live in a time like this. But this goes to show the climate of what's going on within the regime right now. It's extremely fractured. Anyways, so Susan Crabtree, exclusive. A Secret Service counter-sniper sent me an email Monday night to the entire uniformed division, not agents, saying he will not stop speaking out until, quote, 5 high-level supervisors, one down, so that would be Kimberly Cheadle, are either fired or removed from their current positions, close quote. The counter-sniper also said the agency, quote, should expect another assassination attempt before November, and complained that he is no longer proud to be a Secret Service counter-sniper after leadership failed the officers at the Trump rally in Butler on 7/13. Quote, this agency needs to change, the sniper wrote in the email. If not now, when? The next assassination in 30 days? Sadly, we have fallen short for years, the counter-sniper lamented. We just look good doing it. I have conveyed these thoughts to not only supervisors, to include the current captain of counter-snipers, but also those responsible for training us, SOTS and CS, only to be brushed off as those with less experience somehow knew more than me. The team I was once proud to be a part of is something I have to somehow hide as I move into my next career, the counter-sniper continued. Who wants to hire a Secret Service counter-sniper guy who failed? That's the public perception I'm not faced with. That's the Secret Service counter-sniper. The Secret Service counter-sniper team is a stain I will never be able to cleanse. He concluded with these two lines. The motto of the Secret Service, CYA, and every supervisor is doing it right now. The agency quickly deleted the email, an eligible source told Real Clear Politics, full email with name redacted below. So I'll retweet it now. You can go read the whole letter if you'd like to. But that, here we go. Trump is not safe. He should get private security detail put together by people like Eric Prince and Dan Bongino. Tech billionaires supporting Trump could help with funding. Get former SEALs, Secret Service, other spec op guys that can be trusted. Secret Service is politicized and compromised. And this is what people have been calling for a while now. Eric Prince just went on Tucker Carlson a couple days ago. Very, very good episode. And he described it there. Tucker asked him, like, what would you be doing? How would you be protecting Trump right now if you were responsible for it? And the way it was like surreal just listening to him describe it, the types of things that they would have to take into consideration and just looking at the absolute departure from reality that the Secret Service's functioning is right now. There's just no possible way that the adults don't step in at some point. The adults are going to be forced to step in at one point. The only question is, how much is everyone going to suffer before that happens? The stakes on this sort of thing are just enormous. Like when you start taking into consideration drone warfare, my goodness. Yeah, Prince was on Sean. Maybe it was Sean Ryan. It was Sean Ryan that he was talking to, not Tucker. That was the one. It was Sean Ryan. Very good episode. Okay. So we got a story here. This is very creepy. Logo Lifter says, Eric Prince was so far ahead of his time. Russia has copied his playbook with Wagner and is whooping our ass in Africa with it. I think that there's no way that Eric Prince doesn't start becoming a major figure within or adjacent to the administration. He's getting too close to too many of the right people that he's going to be pulled in. And it's like his life is precious right now. I'm sure he's beefing up his own security because this is the trajectory things are going right now. That there's going to be a time where you might be able to go through normal political means to get private military contractors to begin serving some of these essential functions, especially as the regime fractures more and more. But there eventually can come a time where it has to be done extra democratically, and people have to have the stomach for that and the wisdom to be able to do that properly. And the thread I wrote last night, we'll get into here in a little bit, addresses that. So this is a new product called Friend. Friend.com. Watch this ad.
Gosh, I'm out of breath. So we made it. Woo! I don't know how to woo very good. That's fair. All right, let's go.
Let me show you how to game, bro, okay? Oh, come on. Oh, let's go!
Are you serious? Come on, man. I hate this game.
Take notes, baby.
Oh, man, you guys suck.
Bro, you look like the back
Let's
of the
go. Let's go.
Dude, what? How did you do that?
I know the effects are crazy. It's dank. I could eat one of these every day. Oh. Sorry, I got you messy.
It's really nice up here. How'd you find this place?
I don't know. I just kind of like to come up here to be by myself. I've never brought anybody else. I mean, besides her.
She goes everywhere with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guess I must be doing something right then.
I guess so. We'll see.
That is real. That is a real product. I quote tweeted it, this legendary tweet. Sci-fi author. In my book, I invented the Torment Nexus as a cautionary tale. Tech company. At long last, we have created the Torment Nexus from classic sci-fi novel Don't Create the Torment Nexus. Mike of Pole, a powerful mutual. He says, on one level, hell. On levels 2 through 9, hell. On level 10, the possibility of using this device in an unintended way. I use LLMs for search now anyway. Just talk to it like you're prompting it as a research aid like you would ChatGPT, and it texts you a link for the sauce. Maybe that technique is a debate aid to pull sources out of your ass. Still transhumanist hell since you're getting into the mind meld chip brain thinking accelerator type beat. Using this thing as directed on the 10 is tantamount to a great filter level extinction event. That's exactly it. Using this thing as directed on the 10 is tantamount to a great filter level extinction event. Would like to fucks with it and see if I can make it take a prompt like usual, though. This is part of why the Luddite take on this is not, it is not going to survive. You can't just say, no, this sort of thing cannot exist and will not exist. You're not going to stop it. You're not going to prevent it from existing. And there are good applications for this sort of thing. As he says, I've used it the same way. I've used various different large language models as a research aid, or like summarize this thing, or take these different things and look for patterns and connections between them. And in that way, there's not a functional difference between that and like Googling something on the internet, or like doing a search, or any of the other ways that we use this technology. The technology itself has great potential for good and great potential for evil. And you can't just see the evil application and say, oh, that thing can't exist and shouldn't exist. There's no way to prevent something like this from existing. The only way you get something like this to not exist is by having people that don't want to create something like this. That's like the only thing that you could do, because of their own internal character and motivations and inclinations. We're clearly not there. And the kind of the great cosmic irony here is that, as he says, the people who actually want to use this for this purpose are self-extinguishing. Like the reason, the people who feel drawn to using something like this and get sucked into it, they should not be seen as an evil, malevolent force. They are subject to an evil, malevolent force. Their minds are being captured and they're being dragged into a pit with the creepiest, lighthearted aura imaginable to make it seem like they're actually being pulled into heaven. Hell looks like heaven. A couple interesting threads, commentary on this. One is from one of my favorite follows on Twitter, at Owen Broadcast, Owen Cyclops. He's a cartoonist, he's pure millennial vibes. He said, semiotics is the study of signification, unpopular due to being too abstract. Here's why it matters. You make a tech device called Friend. It provides companionship. But to where this wouldn't signal I have companionship, it signals the opposite. It communicates your aloneness. It's a really, really insightful point. Products and social gear generally signal the need rather than the aim. This isn't intuitive, so unless you're dealing with something already socially stigmatized like smoking, you could just miss this entirely. Smoking is a good example. A nicotine patch signals addiction. This also isn't always bad. A tech fitness bracelet signals I'm the kind of person that needs to track fitness metrics. It ostensibly could have been hidden like an ankle monitor or something, or it could look like a watch. So it's a positive signal, but it's a positive signal so people like wearing it. So I'm someone who tracks my fitness metrics. There's a positive social association with that, so you wear it. You wear something that isn't disguised as a watch, but actually looks like a fitness bracelet. See, also, outside of an extreme cultural norm like those Irish rings, you can't wear a bracelet that says looking for a date because it signals your inability to get a date. It sounds stupid, but things generally signal the need for the thing, not the fact that you have it. Just remember the guy I used to work with who wore a nicotine patch while also just continuing to smoke cigarettes. Hope you're doing well, bro. It's also worn as a pendant, like a religious symbol. If the friend is really well designed, it'll become an intermediary layer between self and social connections. It's always with you and talks to you via your phone, which is reality filter. It'll become a psychic ward. This reminds me of the thing that that Pete was saying this morning on the video that I told you guys to go watch, that he dropped on his Substack. He said a lot of people freak out about Elon Musk and they're like, oh, he's going to put a chip in my head. He's like, he's not coming to put a chip in your head. There's going to be a whole line of people who are going to be begging for him to put a chip in their heads. He mentioned like, and I've heard this too from friends of guys who have been injured downrange. They've had like traumatic brain injuries and they're like, hell, my life gets shitty enough. I would be more than happy to experience something like that if it would like help something work better. If it helped me concentrate better or improve my fine motor control or something like that. That's a line like I don't know how I would have the standing to draw a hard line on something like that. If it's a remediating a defect, an artificially created defect, I mean, where do you draw a line with that where you don't also make the same moral case for like a brace on your arm or a pacemaker or a prosthetic arm or leg or something like that? These are very difficult, complicated questions that getting really emotional and freaking out about it doesn't solve anything. But Elon Musk, the thing that Pete was saying is he's not gonna come try to put a chip in your head. If you don't want it, he's not going to force you to take a chip in your head. Same with something like this. If you don't want it, don't get it. And I would say every single person should not want this and should not get this. But I also know that this is going to exist. And blackpilling about the fact that it exists is useless. Don't get one. Encourage people not to get one. And one of the ways you might have to encourage people not to get one is by being friends with them. The thing that signals aloneness to people, if you see someone who wants this, who goes out and gets it, they're signaling, I need a friend. I'm alone. I feel alone. I feel hopeless and despairing. Do something nice for them. That's the sort of spirit that will actually, in a pragmatic sense, can actually amass wealth and influence, which translates to power. The only people who deserve power are the people who get it that way, through sacrificing for other people. Funny, related parts of the story here. Guy says, we know real-life Silicon Valley comedy. Two young prodigal hacker/founders are at each other's throats building competing AI pin startups. Both startups are named Friend. One, the guy you just saw, spends $1.8 million to buy the Friend domain, friend.com. He spent $1.8 million to buy friend.com and launches on International Friendship Day. The other responds with a diss rap video.
Yo, I'm Nick, and for those who don't know, I built Friend. Renamed your tab, jacked my style, built at the real, it's been a while. Investor cash, you burn it quick, I'm grinding hard, tracks in my peak. Don't pay game, where is the proof? All your gas fees, no roof. I'm the founder, hardware in hand. You the Shishido can't understand. I view your jokes, spend a meal on a name. Can't ship a thing, just Twitter fame. Friend and yours, running my wave. Open source fam, digging your grave. Take a seat, I've learned the grind. You're wasting cash, I'm building in time. Respect the game, respect the source. I'm the real friend, the AI force. Yo, I'm Nick.
That one I'm sorry for subjecting you to. He says, also, don't forget the significantly older veteran founder bouncing around in the background, also building an AI pen. I'm not sure who this is referencing. Also dropping videos, subtweeting the competition, and nagging investors. I haven't dug into it enough to figure out who that is. I kind of stopped caring. Okay, let's keep pushing on through this. So this this video or this picture of JD Vance has cropped back up again. JD Vance in 2001. This is September 11th, 2021, rather. He did not look like this in 2001. So he's at a gun show, and I'm not going to be able to zoom in on this photo here for you guys, but it's in one of these spots right in here. I can't remember exactly where. It might be right here, right here, right here. Somewhere in there is a piece of Nazi memorabilia that has a swastika on it. So this chick says, "Mate, have you zoomed in? You should zoom in to the case in front of the man sitting. What's that symbol?" Okay, this tweet is getting a lot of action now, so I'll be silencing it because many of you have taken rhetoric to some painful places and y'all make my brain hurt. This tweet has gathered 90% of the mentions of the word Nazi in the history of this app. The reason I'm highlighting this is for this tweet. Simmer down, fellas. I didn't call JD Vance a Nazi. I merely pointed out he's hovering near a Nazi symbol with his infant right near the guns. All very cool and normal. Remember how I was talking about the dude, the what was his compliance manager? How he sees himself as the imposed upon fearful victim, and he's like fighting back against the power. What this tweet here reveals about this woman's mind is it's fascinating. It's disturbing. It's also kind of, I guess, unfortunately encouraging. This is how deranged these people are. This is not like a sentient person. She thinks him holding his child near a piece of Nazi memorabilia at a gun show, it's like a magical symbol. It has like magical infectious power that if he holds his baby here, it's going to leap out and attach itself to his baby. Or like one of these guns is just going to jump up off the table and start shooting everywhere wildly. These are profoundly retarded people, and I say this with great sympathy. This woman has a child. This is a white married family with a child. For their own sake, these people must be disempowered and they must be ruled. They must be cared for by people who value them for who they are and not for the derangements that have taken them over. This is a person trapped in a bizarre pagan superstition. She lives in a fake world. All right, we got a thread here on Venezuela. Now, I have no idea what's going on in Venezuela. This thread had a lot of stuff in one place, so it makes it easy to share on the show here. But, you know, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what position exactly. He's from Mint Press News. Just take it for what it's worth. But it's kind of a jumping off point to some other thoughts I had. So let's go through this. He says, there's a coup d'etat attempt underway here in Venezuela, fueled by tons of fake news. In this thread, I'll debunk some of the most egregious and viral fake stories circulating. Add your own in the replies. A viral video claims that leftist thieves are stealing ballot boxes. In reality, these are aircon units. Ballot boxes are small brown cardboard boxes barely larger than a shoebox. These giant appliances bear no resemblance to ballot boxes. So here's the video. So it's pretty obvious that it's like some kind of an appliance. This is what a ballot box in Venezuela actually looks like. Now, what's funny is that all the people who passed this off as stealing ballot boxes, they were like, oh, well, it's kind of some appliance, but it looks like it's like sort of more secure or something than a freaking cardboard box on a TV tray. This is their ballot box. A taped together cardboard box on a TV tray that you drop a paper into. This video, claiming to show huge clashes between protesters and police today, is going viral. But as El De Jesus Reyes and others have noted, this video is 7 years old. So this is a video being passed around. Tons and tons of people out. It looks like rioting and looting and all sorts of stuff. It's 7 years old. This image, which many claim to be official election results, has been seen by tens of millions of people. It claims that the vote count is 109%. But actually, all that happened is that the three minor opposition candidates pictured got 4.6% of the vote together, not each. So what he's saying is these three guys all collectively got 4.6%, which left the remaining, so 4.6 for 95, 95.4, 4.6. Yeah, okay, so it adds up to 100. What's the rest of this? This is a simple data entry error from someone making an infographic for the TV. These are not the official results. The official results add up to 100. Dishonest actors are promoting this to spread the idea that the official election results are fraudulent. People are claiming this image is from the National Electoral Council, and the charts on the screens show Gonzalez's victory. But this isn't from the CNE at all. Rather, it is from Mercala Ragua, a totally different organization with no access to voting information. Again, I'm just... The purpose of this here is the thread itself, the existence of the thread itself. The actual details of the thread could go either way. I'm not going and verifying all these things. The opposition is also blatantly using a bot network to boost their narrative on social media. It's impossible. Maduro's a fraud. There's a whole bunch of this. Maduro's a fraud. Maduro's a fraud. Maduro's a fraud. So there's some sort of a color revolution. We have all the hallmarks of a color revolution, disinformation campaign, fifth generation warfare, election subversion operation against Maduro. I know for a fact that this is fake news because I was right there in this crowd as this video was taken. It was in fact the opposition that tried to shut down this Caracas polling station. A group of over 100 right-wing demonstrators crowded around the entrance to stop people from entering. Oh my God. So an End Wokeness had tweeted, you can vote your way into communism, but you can't vote your way out. Venezuela is shutting polling stations. So what he's claiming is that this is the right-wing challenger to Maduro. Continuing on down, Elon Musk himself retweets a video purporting to show protesters tearing down a statue of President Hugo Chavez today. But this video is from 2017. So End Wokeness, again, tweeted this video out. Elon says, adios, dictatura Maduro. The widely circulated images of a man in Aragua murdered by government are completely fake, as this video shared by this guy clearly shows. He just gets up and leaves after he, quote-unquote, dies. Blatantly fake news.
Este es el gobierno que usted quiere, maldito desgraciado. Huevona. Mataron a este pan aquí.
I actually realized I probably shouldn't play that on YouTube. It might get it pulled. So, it's fake. It's fake. It shows him later on the on a scooter. He gets up and his face has all got dirt and stuff on it, and he's fine. Perhaps the most important fake news is that the opposition actually won 73% of the vote. The U.S. government has fueled these allegations, but I spoke to dozens of American electoral observers here, and they told a very different story. Here's my report. And the headline is, while U.S. politicians call fraud, American election observers endorse results. Versions of this image, which purport to show a police officer pointing a gun at a defenseless woman and child, have been seen by millions of people, but video evidence clearly shows that the police officer is unarmed and is actually waving his arms at her. He says, this is total nonsense. It says, Venezuelans, the tweets he screenshotted say, Venezuelans are taking control of the main airport. The military has refused to fight the citizens and is instead guarding them. The Venezuelan police are removing their uniforms and bulletproof vests, refusing to fight their own people. President Maduro is rumored to have fled the country. And then he tweeted, breaking, this is 4 hours before he took the screenshot, breaking, Nicolas Maduro addresses crowds at the Miraflores presidential palace. This is all info warfare going on. He says, this is total nonsense. I've been speaking with people flying out from the airport and it is operating completely normally. There is no takeover of the airport at all. And as for Maduro, he just gave a speech tonight at the presidential palace in front of thousands of people. So much for fleeing the country. This video has 1.7 million views and 21,000 likes, but it is highly misleading. The video is from 2017. Right-wing Spanish politician Isabel Diaz Ayuso jumps on the fake news bandwagon, sharing a 2017 clip as if it was from this week. Expect a lot more of this in the coming days. So, he's got all the hallmarks of someone who's apparently defending Maduro and claiming that this is a right-wing plot to color revolution him. But this makes me, Martyr Maid tweeted something yesterday. He tweeted the Norman Rockwell guy standing alone painting and said, I have no idea what's going on in Venezuela. And that's where I'm at too. I have no idea what's going on in Venezuela, but something isn't right here. This is not just a simple regime color revolution. The sides aren't lining up right here. The people who are creating the propaganda with the counter propaganda, if this is quote unquote the regime, it's some faction of the regime that's not in lockstep with the rest of the regime. And we're not necessarily getting it, at least that I've seen so far. This hasn't become the story going on in the mainstream news, the quote unquote like the legacy media, which is how these sorts of color revolution things have always gone. They have to take over and dominate the Western media. This is happening on the side, almost as if people kind of like they have to talk about it, but they don't want to talk about it too much. The guy running the cover for it is fucking Mint Press News. And you've got Eric Prince and Elon have both been very outspoken about it, pushing this story out into the narrative. And obviously they're anti-Maduro. Maduro himself has long been a puppet of the U.S. So something very odd is happening, and I don't know what it is. I can't hard and fast conclude anything right now, but to me, this isn't as simple. I know the black pillars say, "Oh, it's because they're just creating a pretext to send a whole bunch of people to the southern border." Well, that doesn't help their case. The last thing that Kamala Harris needs right now, as effectively the acting president, is a major border issue that brings that thing back up and rips the Band-Aids off and jams, it's like ripping a Band-Aid off a wound and jamming a finger in it a whole bunch. They're trying to kill the border czar story. Because now maybe that was a pretext because some people knew something like this was coming. But there's something very interesting going on with this. There's some pivots that are happening. And there's clearly Western interests that are behind this battle back and forth to some degree, but what those interests are and what they're working toward isn't completely clear to me just yet. So I'm gonna I'll be keeping an eye on this. If anybody else has any stories related to this, explain more or anything like that, please do send them over to me, Real King Pilled, on Twitter. Just send me a DM, realkingpilled@gmail.com, or you can hop in the King Pilled Discord and tag me on them there. Go to kingpilled.com to join there. By the way, we're going to be announcing a new partnership that we have with the King Pilled Discord here in a very short period of time. We're getting the details hammered out in the background, but it's going to be very exciting. Nice little step forward with the group. So be on the lookout for that. Kingpilled.com if you want to get signed up. So I know some of you guys are aware of the fourth turning, but someone posted this video out, and I was like, oh, this is a good little refresher, because I think this is going to become more relevant over the next few months. We're going to refer back to this at different times. This is a video on the fourth turning explained, posted by TFTC, a media company focused on Bitcoin, who I don't know. I've had a whole bunch of things that I've been following that I found out I'm unfollowing. I think when I changed my profile picture and I lost the blue check, I actually got unfollowed from a bunch of people. Like Andrew Torba was one of them that I saw this morning. I unfollowed. It's annoying. Okay, so this is the fourth turning explained. We're just gonna watch this video, 4 minutes long. We'll touch on it, and then got a couple more things to round off the show. So I appreciate you guys hanging out here. Do me a favor and hit the like button. We got 82 watching on YouTube and 48 likes. And again, this is the last day of July. Last day for super chats to get in on July. So if you want to send a super chat or become a channel member, it's $5 to be a member of the King Pilled. That helps us keep doing what we're doing here. So I've got this on 1.5x. Apologies to those of you who have a hard time listening to the fast stuff, but we're coming up on 2 hours, and I've probably got at least another 30 minutes worth of content, maybe more. So we're going to press on through this.
History repeats itself in 80-year blocks called saeculum. We'll just call them history blocks. Not exactly 80 years. This is history, not math, but roughly the span of a human lifetime, maybe 80 to 90 years. Within these 80-year history blocks, we have 4 turnings of around 20 years each. We usually call them generations. This book calls them turnings. Turnings are sort of like seasons, like spring, summer, fall, winter. Throughout our history, we've had these 80-year blocks, and the 80-year blocks have been remarkably similar to each other. We're in one now. The first turning, the first season, is a high, an upbeat era. The second turning is an awakening, a passionate era. The third turning is an unraveling, a downcast era. And the fourth turning, well, sorry, but fourth turnings suck. The fourth turning is a crisis, an era of upheaval. We're in a fourth turning right now. During a high, the getting is good. we had the most even distribution of wealth during our high. You could work at a gas station and afford to buy a house. This high is the period that the MAGA hats refer to. We got Hank Williams and Elvis and Little Richard.
This is rock and roll, TV, space program, something jets, maybe Corvette, Mustang.
And the birth of rock and roll.
Yeah,
we launched
jets.
monkeys and men into space. This is when the Mustangs and Corvettes first came out.
Bikini.
Our high ended with the assassination of John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963. The high is not a high for everyone, of course. America still had a segregated South. Homosexuality was illegal and considered a mental disorder. The high is a period of conformity. The age of nonconformity and of social justice begins during the Awakening, our passionate era. During the Awakening...
Little leak there on the perspective of the political perspective of the person putting the video together. So from the Awakening, you have Bob Dylan, Beatles, LSD, Woodstock, Kubrick, Star Wars, computers. So the fourth turning type of analysis of generations, and then you have the Boomer and the Gen X and the Millennials and Gen Z, and then the Alphas. Like it was evaluating and looking at these trends and the different personalities of these different eras. That is what actually led us on down the little rabbit hole where we stumbled upon this PayPal mafia phenomenon. Because by and large, this incoming elite class hails from Gen X. They are Gen Xers. The entire Mike Solana persona that, the person that Mike Solana represents, that he is and represents, is very Gen X. Gen X into millennial, a little bit very Gen X in terms of personality. And many of these guys are Gen X.
Awakening, we had Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, acid, Vietnam protests and Vietnam itself, the Women's Liberation Movement, Stonewall and the Gay Rights Movement, great movies, great music. This is when the first Macintosh computer came out. The Awakening is a time of increasing individualism. This second turning, this Awakening, ended with the re-election of Ronald Reagan in 1984.
So if you notice the Awakening period here, this is like this basically falls into Boomer, Gen X, Millennial into Zoomer kind of, but I think the recent generations, the Millennial and Zoomer generations are much shorter and more compressed, and they kind of blend into each other a little bit. Because Millennials is definitely not until 08. Millennial is going to be from 84 to probably 97-ish, something like that. And then the Zoomer is going to be 97-ish to probably 2008, 2010, somewhere in there. Just because so much is happening in this period. But on average, it comes out to being about 20 years per seculum or per turning. But so then you get, this is the coming of age. The Awakening generation, when the Gen X people are born, is kind of like the coming of age generation for the Boomers. And then when the Millennial generation is like the coming of age generation for Gen X. Then the Zoomers generation is like the coming of age for the Millennials. So we're in the coming of age of the Millennials right now, which means we're entering an age where we're going to be more dominated by the Gen X culture as the Boomer culture dies off.
Things get messy during the third turning, during the unraveling. We got the fall of Soviet communism and the beginning of the Russian gangster state. The greatest musicians of the time sang about violence and decay in their deteriorating cities. The LA riots, OJ, the bombing of Bosnia, and the Columbine high school shootings on the same day. September 11th, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Our unraveling ended with the financial crisis of 2008. 80 years ago, in the last fourth turning, America had a Great Depression, then World War II. 80 years before that, the Civil War. 80 years before that, the Revolutionary War. Each generation's archetype is the characteristic that will define the generation in its prime, in midlife. The Boomer archetype is...
Let's look at this here. So the cohorts, you have the high, corresponds to Boomers, born 43 to 60. The Awakening corresponds to Gen X, born 61 to 81. The Unraveling corresponds to Millennials, born 82 to 2003. And then the Crisis is Gen Z, born 2004 to 20-ish. And I would quibble a little bit with some of these dates, but it could be that in hindsight we end up seeing that those dates correspond more appropriately. But so what he's going to do now is going to do the archetypes for each generation, which is also the archetypes for each turning. And then he's going to show how this pattern extends back into history very far.
Define the generation in its prime, in midlife. The Boomer archetype is the prophet. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are boomers and prophets. Both predicted that one day everyone, not just big corporations and governments, would own a computer. Gates even predicted a crisis like COVID-19 5 years beforehand. The writers of this book are boomers and prophets. Gen X is the nomad generation. The quintessential Gen Xer, Elon Musk, builds things that move us from one place to another. Rockets, electric cars, hyperloops, nomadic devices.
So as the nomadic generation is coming into power, you're seeing a detachment from the existing institutions and ways of doing things to something that's more flexible and adaptable and explosive. And you're seeing the digital nomad becoming a thing because we're entering into the generation where the nomad generation is now coming into its ascendancy. So there's going to be a rise in sort of individuation. The prophet generation was like consolidating everything, and now we're going to get like the rise in individuation. Then we're going to get a consolidation again at around the time where the millennials become the ascendant generation. And then there will be another individuation or unraveling, so to speak, as down here Gen Z becomes into the ascendancy.
But the millennials, raised during the unraveling, will emerge as the hero generation during this crisis. These are the Parkland High students, the frontline hospital workers, and Malala Yousafzai. The book says millennials will be the World War II heroes of our history block. We don't know what Gen Z will do, but they will be an artist generation. From them will emerge the next Bill Withers, Toni Morrison, or Bob Dylan, all born during the last crisis, all from an artist generation. The history block.
So you can see the previous history block started with the prophet generation, 1865 to 1886. So this corresponded to a huge rise in Christian missionary work, which actually laid the foundation ultimately for the national security state. That the U.S. national security state, all the different spying apparatuses and everything, those were built on top of what were originally the combination of colonial and missionary work going out into the second and third world nations. Then you had the awakening generation, which was another nomad generation. They called it the lost generation, just before the people who formed probably the majority of the armed forces in World War I. Many of them died. And their generation was sort of lost to history a little bit. And then the hero generation would be the ones who fought and won World War II. So they're the generation that there was a lot that was wrong with them, and they're the ones who suffered the brunt of the lead up to this big catastrophic explosion. But they wind up being the ones who, in retrospect, are venerated for kind of overseeing the passage through the Great Crisis. And then you get the silent generation, which is going to be the artists, like the Zoomers. So you get the Werner Herzog, Bob Dylan. I think he mentioned a couple other names. I can't remember them now. But so you get that more kind of moody, artistic type of personality, which is what Gen Z is very much moving toward.
Block before ours ended with World War II and began with the Civil War, 80 years prior. The history block before that ended with the Civil War and began with the end of the Revolution.
So Revolutionary War to Civil War. So you have the same prophet, nomad, hero, artist breakdown across each of these approximately 20-year windows.
Revolutionary War, 80 years prior. Every 80 years or so, something big comes along and changes everything. And now we're at the end of our history block, right in the middle of our crisis. We're in the process of changing our world again.
So a lot of the predictions that the Fourth Turning guys made have come true. Now, I think they've come out with another book recently, and this has been one of my to-do list things to watch and consume. But the original book is very good. They're libs. They're total libs, but they very, very accurately predicted almost every single thing that's happened over the last 20 years. They penned it within this 20-year range, kind of, but there's going to be kind of like this thing and this thing and this thing. They've predicted all of it. And they've said that this crisis period is going to last until around 2028, which I think is really interesting with the trajectory things are going right now. So 2024 to 2028 historically is going to be a very tumultuous, crisis-ridden period, akin to like World War II. But then it ends, and there's a big high that comes on the back end of that. So regardless of what happens over the next, if we're using this as an approximate model, and maybe it's not 2028, maybe it's 2026, or maybe it's 2032 or 2035 even, it's still like within these windows, you can kind of roughly predict the direction that things are going to go because there are natural cycles to humanity as a species, as a collective consciousness that mirror life cycles of an individual consciousness. So did World War I not quite fit into the model, so we just cap it off with World War II? Well, I think it's kind of like World War I was the forecast of the World War II. World War II was the big one, but World War I was presaging it, kind of the way that like the 9/11 to housing collapse era was what presaged what we're going through now. That was the entry point of the big conflict, and it takes about 20 years or so for that to really play out into its full explosive manner. And then there's a sort of collapse, but then a rebuild and an exaltation coming out the other side of that. There's going to be a winning side. There's going to be some great mimetic controversy, and one side is going to emerge victorious. And the act of emerging victorious is going to be really powerfully amplifying to their spirit. And then they get that heroic sense, and that you build a whole bunch of social capital around that, and then you can parlay that into economic and political capital. So in the same way that like the heroic generation came out, like this would be the darker take on this. The post World War II order was kind of what, the 50s and the 60s, which were the great time that everyone wants to go back to and be like, oh man, if we could just live in the 50s and the 60s. But the positive things about living with the 50s and the 60s corresponded to like the birth of the Nuremberg regime. You got both of these things simultaneously. There's things that are very great and wonderful and wholesome about the 50s and the 60s that it would be great to have a revival in. But these kind of come together. You get the revival of the great, wholesome, heroic, social bonding and, always up and to the right sense of people. But with that, you're going to get the subversive institution of a new iteration of the Nuremberg regime type of thing. So both of these things are going to come to pass. You're going to experience both of them. And the one you choose to focus on and amplify and invest your energy to is the one that you will experience most. In this life, there is no like eradicating the evil thing and never experiencing it. It's always going to be there, and it's always going to be amplifying more and more. And the good stuff is also always going to be there and always going to be amplifying more and more. And it's a choose your own adventure. You get to participate in the one you want to participate in. So for the doomers, there's some bad news. Everyone who thinks that these AI, the large language models, the AI personalities and stuff are on an unbroken headlong dash to Skynet. Well, there's been a hitch in the giddy up. A new paper in Nature found that you cannot, in fact, train AIs on AI-generated data and expect them to continue improving. What happens is actually that the model collapses and ends up producing nonsense. So the breeds in real images, they've got a Pembroke Welsh Corgi, I can't even read that from here, a French Bulldog, Golden Retriever, Dalmatian, and Golden Retriever. So the AI model generates an image of a dog. So the second step, you have the breeds in the images generated by AI trained on real images. So they're pretty close. They're very good. Then breeds and images generated by AI trained on AI-generated images. Now they're all Golden Retrievers. And then the model collapse. They turn into like melted chocolate chip cookies. So all these great large language models, what they're learning is that when you start training them on their own products, with the things that they've produced, it kills them. They collapse. Now, this is a thing that there's a new point of innovation. So people are going to be innovating on workarounds to this problem, and I'm sure they'll come up with some other hellish thing at some point. But one of the things this indicates, I think, is the inevitability of human participation in the world. There's always going to be a human element. You're never going to port, like Mark Zuckerberg was saying, the human spirit is something that you can't just like port it into a machine and have the machine run itself. There's always going to be the human element there. So all the worst doomer Skynet forecasting is just blackpilling. So there's the source of it. I've noticed people interpreting this as synthetic data cannot be useful, and some others insinuating that synthetic data strategies actually are naive in implementation, like the strategy shown in this paper. Neither is true. Try not to come down too hard on synthetic data. So I'll retweet this if you want to go find it and look at the actual journal article yourself. So last two things we're going to read. I've got speaking of Charles Haywood, I just saw his name in the chat. He finally released what he's been writing for a while on cancellation and the use of power. And I haven't read it fully, but I skimmed the majority of it. It's very worthwhile, so I'm going to read it for you guys here. And then we'll round it off with this thread that I tweeted last night. And we'll get you guys out of here. So on cancellation and the use of power, written by Charles Haywood. This is posted at theworthyhouse.com. At the risk of being viewed as a boomer, which I am not, the most Charles Haywood opener ever, At the risk of being viewed as a boomer, which I am not, let us ponder the immortal lyrics of the band Kansas from 1977. I close my eyes only for a moment, and the moment's gone. Such a moment sparked for the American right a few weeks ago, the feeling that we were on the doorstep of ascendancy. In the past, this feeling has always been an illusion, swiftly dispelled and leaving the left in ever firmer and more malignant control. What will happen in 2024 remains to be seen, but the recent feeling of ascendancy has also already faded. It was inevitable. No great political change ever comes without a high price, and the greater the change, the higher the price. We must buy the ticket, and we must take the ride. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago when we were all feeling that high. I was like, how long is this going to last? It's going to go away. When it goes away, you're going to feel the feelings of doom and everything come back in, and you got to be ready for it. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Someday, however, the ride will come to an end. And at that terminus will be a total right victory, if we are favored by God in history, which even though it has no arrow, points always in the direction of reality and thus towards the right. I really like this framing. History has no arrow, but it points always in the direction of reality. We could diverge from reality, but history is always going to pull us back to reality. All history is Christian history, so to speak. And the way that Charles Haywood defines the left and the right, which I think is very useful, is that the right is true. The right is the political manifestation of the true, the good, and the beautiful, which are objective and not subjective. The left will be consigned to the trash. It will return to the outer darkness, a forgotten and discredited anti-human theory, akin to Mithraism or the worship of Ammon, of no relevance to the daily lives of men and women, as it was before the so-called Enlightenment wrenched the West from its path to glory. Thus, we should consider if and how the right should use power against the enemies of the American nation, high or low, when we acquire such power. This will not happen today or tomorrow, or even perhaps in my lifetime. There's a very long way to go before this question has practical application, but for the first time in my life, it seems at least a possible future. The immediate trigger for these thoughts was an online brouhaha a few weeks back, immediately after the left-generated attempt to assassinate Donald Trump, the specific event which briefly awoke in the right the feeling we might be in the ascendant. On X, the massively followed account Libs of TikTok posted a short video taken by a man questioning a woman at work about her online support for Donald Trump's death. She had posted to Facebook, 2, spelling is correct, bad, they, spelling is correct, weren't a better shooter. This took place at a Home Depot in upstate New York. The woman, Darcy Waldron Pinkney, was a cashier. She was a sad sack, aging, fat, and morose. Home Depot quickly announced she was no longer employed by the company, although whether she was fired or quit was not clear. She immediately disappeared entirely from the public eye. Nor did she ever rise into the public eye except on X, and there only among those on the right. This entire episode was ignored by regime media and by the left on social media. It is impossible to find out more about her. She deleted her Facebook account, and Google immediately manually scrubbed the cache of her account. This was undoubtedly a successful, if very minor, exercise of what the right has called for the past several years cancellation, the ubiquitous use by the left of social and political power to cause actual harms to the life and especially the livelihoods of anyone whose destruction could prove a demonstration of left dominance and advance the left's cause through instilling fear. The tactic is used primarily against the right, but also against those insufficiently left. The tactic of cancellation was extremely successful for the past decade, although the left has reached diminishing returns using it in the past year due to a combination of 3 factors. First, X being acquired by Elon Musk, which broke the left's absolute and total control of social media and thereby changed to a small degree the tone of public conversation. This has caused some cracks in the regime's narrative, although it is still true that, for example, if someone had shot at Biden, it would still be the only topic in the news, with wall-to-wall 24-hour coverage combined with unending assaults on anyone on the right. But in contrast, the regime is already succeeding in memory holing the story both of Trump's assassination attempt and his incredible reaction to it. Second, the current wars of the Israelis, which have led to a partial fracturing of the left, especially with respect to the opinions of wealthy and powerful Jews, traditional supporters of the left. And third, a modest preference cascade in 2024, which has led to, for example, it being permitted to point out anti-white hatred, when a year ago that would lead and did lead to total personal destruction for any person doing so. Using cancellation, the left destroyed the lives of a great many people, and, more generally, succeeded in terrorizing all of American society for years, in order to achieve their political ends. To take one of the innumerable examples, in 2020, a random California public utility worker, one Emmanuel Cafferty, was seen cracking his knuckles while his hand was outside the window of his company truck. A nationwide mob was immediately generated, ludicrously claiming he was flashing a white supremacist symbol, and he was immediately fired. At any large corporation or entity, every single person who was right-leaning has, especially since 2020, lived in fear of his political opinions being revealed to his detriment. This is not the terror of the French Revolution, because today's left is hyper-feminized and shrinks so far from direct violence. But it is unprecedented in American history, myths about communists in the 1950s notwithstanding. Still, it seems unlikely that cancellation will ever again be as powerful a tool for the left as it was. The left relies heavily on spells being cast, which hold society in thrall by suspending reality. And when those spells are broken, they cannot be recast in the same way. The traditional response of the left is to move to direct violence as a result, as can already be seen in the Trump assassination attempt, so we should expect more of that. But cancellation, at least as practiced for the past decade, will never be as effective. True, little has changed in terms of permitted opinions at those entities controlled by the left, including all white-collar jobs and many blue-collar jobs. For example, Microsoft allegedly dismantled its DEI apparatus, but you can be sure that the same right opinions, such as expressing any support for Trump, that would get you fired last month will still get you fired next month. Inside the right's media sphere, of growing importance because of the erosion of left control, the Pinckney episode revealed a sharp divide. On one side were those who opposed exposing Pinckney, given that the intent was her cancellation. This took the form of three general arguments. The first was that cancellation was inherently bad because it violated the core American value of free speech, and it was hypocritical of those on the right, having complained, completely ineffectually and to the cackles and derision of the left, about it for years, to immediately start using the same tactic the instant it became available to them. Whether this was a unique moment in which they could use the tactic immediately after the assassination attempt and limited to that case, or a larger change in the zeitgeist, we will discuss. The second, related, was that her cancellation was a tactical error, certain to drive away centrists and the apolitical whose support should be sought. Pinckney was not the enemy, merely a hapless pawn, and treating her as an enemy alienated those not on the left whose favor we should be seeking. The third was that it was, in essence, immoral, unkind, and unchristian. Attacking apparently weak, sad people was unjust. Instead, mercy was called for, at least against such individuals, if not against the powerful on the left. Supposedly, an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind, as Mahatma Gandhi probably did not say. The illustrious Peachy Keenan adopted the third tack, though the three are not mutually exclusive. She posted, quote, "I totally object to an older woman being fired from this type of job. It's not her fault she is brainwashed. I forgive her. Her life is hard enough. Maybe just ask her to delete?" Close quote. I responded, not thinking much about it. I disagree. We can only win when punishment for our enemies, all of them, is 10x or 100x what they have done to us for decades. Parentheses, this is the first time I've disagreed with you. Close quote. This exchange went relatively viral, leading to various follow-ups, including Keenan's quote, "Look, I agree in theory, but this poor woman looks so sad and broken. In her individual case, perhaps mercy is better. Of course, if she turns out to be a truly bad person, I would consider retracting." Close quote. And she is a truly bad person because she supports the left. True, only 5 or 10% of the left is hardcore. The rest will just change their opinions when the change comes. But she signed up as a foot soldier for evil. She is responsible for the consequences, and her harm will advance the cause of good. Close quote. I also noted, quote, "It's the example that matters. All must fear real harm for helping the left, just like everyone on the right has for years, only more." And it's in French, pour encourager les autres, to encourage the others. Various other figures weighed in, including Nicolo Soldo, whose work I greatly admire, but who responded very intemperately, perhaps in his Croatian fastness, several glasses deep into a bottle of Slivovitz. His objection, shorn of unproductive obscenities and insults, was the second, tactical one, and representative of a broad swath of opinion. Thousands of other comments were offered. Far more famous people had similar arguments revolving around Pinckney or one of several other individuals who faced employment consequences as a result of statements supporting the assassination of Trump. Scott Alexander, a very popular centrist, rationalist writer, an interesting thinker who is always horribly blinkered by his own ideological prior commitments and his total lack of history knowledge, weighed in with a set of confused arguments and ludicrously unrealistic prescriptions. As with all such arguments, the matter disappeared in a few days, but as I say, it is worth carefully parsing out the discussion because it has greater implications for our future. We can divide the arguments supporting Pinckney's cancellation into 11, with some overlap among them. At the end of this article are links to several pieces that contain some various forms of these arguments. 1. Pinckney would likely harm any person on the right if she could, just as any typical leftist would. That she can't is irrelevant, as are her internal mental processes and how she arrived at them, such as if she is brainwashed or not. More specifically, it is necessary to harm those wishing to harm us in order that they collectively be dissuaded from harming us in the future. In game theory, this is called tit for tat, and it is the only way to play such a game that leads to any kind of stable equilibrium. Those who refuse end up utterly dominated, a situation that is very familiar to the right. This does not mean that random people are to be harmed or targeted. That does not demonstrate anything to one's opponent. It means, however, that any representative of one's opponent will do for the purpose. 2. In fact, however, Pinckney does have plenty of power to harm those on the right, even as a lowly Home Depot cashier. Apparently, low-power individuals on the left very often have great power over those on the right. For example, many such individuals acted as eager enforcers for the regime during the Wuhan plague, getting their coworkers fired for such offenses as not accepting the devil's shot, not wearing masks, or voicing objections to the various ever-shifting forms of compliance to regime dictates. They have also acted as thuggish hitman for the mandated anti-white hatred of the regime during and since 2020, and for other regime demands such as pretending men and women can change their sex. It is a historical fact and a commonplace that no left regime has ever gained power without the help of such people, who for direct personal gain, to settle scores, and for psychological reasons, have always proven happy to assist evil. Among the worst offenders among the left have always been such people. East Germany is perhaps the best known example. As I noted on X, I have little doubt that Pinckney is a true believer in left principles, even if she thinks little about those principles. Under Stalinist communism, she would have been an eager little beaver, helping send people to the Gulag. Under Pol Pot, she would have helped to hunt down and kill supposed intellectuals. In both cases, she would have done so with glee and a feeling of luxuriant satisfaction, and gladly accepted the forthcoming rewards. It is always possible that Pinckney herself is an exception to this general rule. We cannot know for sure. But it is a sad fact of human nature that people love to have power over others, and no exercise of power is more obvious and more satisfying than harming others, especially if at the same time you can tell yourself you are a wonderful person and bringing about the imminent utopia. Therefore, to claim that Pinckney and millions of unknown others for whom she is a stand-in is a nobody, merely a chattering busybody with no real impact, is false. 3. It is not an adequate response to say that we should instead attack only the powerful. First, the mighty on the left are not available targets for the right, which has very little power and usually fails to use what we do have. And when we try to use it, we are almost always neutered by our supposed allies. One reason Trump is so hated by the left, because they perceive, perhaps correctly this time, he will not neuter his acolytes. Second, the more powerful the figure on the left, the more certain that no actual harm will come to him, because the left maintains an extensive ecosystem of permanent protection for all their allies. Thus, while Kimberly Cheadle, the incompetent and stupid sometime head of the Secret Service, a target Keenan specifically proposed, did resign, she will suffer no harm at all. Nor did the right force her to resign. She only resigned after her faction, the Jill Biden faction, was forced from power, and she would never have resigned otherwise. You can be certain Cheadle will soon obtain a prestigious, well-paying job, and she will suffer zero social opprobrium. Rather, she will be lionized by everyone she knows as a heroic and fierce woman who, quote, stood up against the hatred of the right. At this moment, therefore, saying that the right should only attack the powerful is simply an instruction to engage in performative, ineffective demands and not accomplish a single thing that has any concrete effect on the left. Number 4. Even assuming for the purposes of argument that Pinckney does not want to, has not, and will not harm people on the right, she supports the enemy in other ways. Therefore, she herself is an enemy, and therefore the distinction is one without a difference. She is an enemy soldier, even if the battle is not with weapons. Or rather, the right, unlike the left, has not yet picked up weapons. We return to tit for tat. Number 5, turnabout is fair play as a matter of simple justice, totally aside from practical considerations. The left has done far worse to very many people, including recently throwing a dying grandmother in prison for praying at an abortuary, with the judge, who is named Colleen Collar-Cotelli, openly laughing at her victim in court. What is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. Number 6, cancellations by the left and by the right are not equivalent. Pinckney was doubtless easily able to find an equivalent job because nobody on the right pursued or will pursue her, and cashier jobs were easy to find. But more generally, the left always protects any member of the left who faces consequences for his actions in support of the left, as rare as those people have been. The opposite is true for any person canceled by the left. No entities on the right offer them new jobs or money, and the left, which has infinite resources, and more importantly, a huge number of people who have no real lives and obtain their meaning by advancing left causes, which is the main reason why Wikipedia is entirely curated by the left, make it their business to pursue any right person who is canceled, so he cannot get another job. Thomas Acord, a teacher famously canceled with the assistance of the odious Rod Dreher, is a good example. The odious Rod Dreher. Another is Jack Phillips, the Colorado baker who refuses to bake cakes for perverts, but has been viciously attacked for a decade by lavishly funded organs of the left seeking his personal destruction, even after he won a victory in the Supreme Court. Tens of thousands of other examples exist. 7. It is a nice and pleasing idea that we should have a rule that nobody should be canceled, citing core American principles and offering soaring phrases about how matters should be if we followed the principles of the Constitution. But as is often said, quoting Cormac McCarthy, if the rule that you followed led you to this place, of what use was the rule? This argument also imagines that there is some still reachable civil society, a neutral public sphere just waiting to be regained. That ship sailed from America a long time ago when the left first gained ascendancy in the 1960s. It is certainly hypocritical to say one day that nobody should be canceled because of abstract and universal principles, and the next day to eagerly engage in cancellation. So what? A foolish consistency rather than necessary action to achieve a goal crucial to the survival of the nation is scrutinism, exaltation of being a beautiful loser. Winning, through the total destruction and elimination from history of the entire ideology of the left, is the only goal. Any method that does not include destruction of innocence is legitimate. And anyway, the objection should not be to cancellation in the abstract. It is that my allies, rather than my enemies, are the ones being canceled. The left should be canceled and expelled wholesale from our society. Free speech is a nice idea. It only works in a society which holds core values in common. The left understands this, which is why it has always denied free speech to the right anytime it is able to do so. 8. A related, more abstract false idea is that it is somehow inherently bad to wield power to political ends. You see comparisons in this instance to J.R.R. Tolkien's One Ring, a claim that any exercise of political power destroys the wielder. This is self-evidently stupid and disingenuous, meant to disarm the right. To say such things is to refute them, and to willingly go to the camps the left is preparing for us, as they always do when they gain unbridled power. Number 9. It is not true that Christian charity or mercy, again, more of which later, dictates that we should ignore clear moral turpitude, or only respond to it with verbal chastisement. It does demand that we give the left sinner food if she shows up at the food pantry in actual need, and that we pray for her to change her ways and behave in an appropriate manner, which does not necessarily include endorsing Trump, but does include wholly rejecting the left. That's one of the most important points he's made so far. Number 10. Administering justice often requires acting in ways that cause others to suffer. For example, many on the right call, absolutely correctly and necessarily, for mass deportations of all illegal migrants in America, along with others who have been wrongly granted citizenship or who have harmed America and Americans. While it will actually be quite easy to force illegals to self-deport through such mechanisms as denying any public services or employment to them, even in that limited and very mild circumstance, the left will flood our media with pictures of crying children, wailing women, and stories of the hard lives of these criminals when they return to the countries they never should have left. If the right cannot stomach a minor transitory harm to one person, we will never be able to do what needs to be done. And number 11. Cancellations by the right are inherently limited to direct political ends. The same is not true of the left, which always and everywhere demands never-ending humiliation rituals of victims, in order to conceal that their demands are insane and opposed to reality. This is why terror of random innocence is inevitable under left domination, but never exists under the right, which focuses on specific individuals and their specific actions. The right has no need of humiliation rituals. Therefore, their actions are strictly practical, not designed to impose a new ideology, because the right has no ideology, only a desire to hew to reality. Although reality can be perceived differently by different factions on the right, a significant problem for the future victorious right. I generally agree with all of these arguments. We now turn to the counter-arguments on the right, which are fewer in number. We should separate the tactical from the moral arguments. To be sure, on the left, this distinction does not exist. What advances left ideological goals is what is moral in the eyes of the left. Almost anyone on the left would be greatly puzzled by the idea that it was somehow immoral to cancel someone on the right. The only immorality is failing to cancel someone on the right, or not canceling that person as aggressively as possible. The right's binding to morality, the same Christian morality which has always underpinned the Western civilization the left seeks to destroy, limits our freedom of action. But there is no cure for that. Throwing over Christian morality leads to, as we have seen more than once, atrocious outcomes. The tactical arguments against canceling Pinckney are, in general, worthless. None of their proponents ever identify any concrete example of them because they are fantasies. They therefore immediately retreat to such weak sauce as bleating about goodwill, imagining that being perceived as being of goodwill, meaning staying one's hand against political enemies, is a self-executing political benefit. Such arguments are very familiar fantasies. For my entire political life, variations on such arguments have been used by those putatively on the right to self-neuter their effectiveness, to preemptively surrender. because what their opponents really seek, really crave, is the approval of the left, not the implementation of any right policy. They can never give any examples of supposed conversion of centrists or normies to the right resulting from moderating right positions, because such examples do not exist. Conversions to the right happen when reality intrudes on the fantasies around which most Americans revolve their political life, the result of being drenched their entire lives in unending propaganda. Americans who are neither left nor right, although right is the default position of any normal person, and of something more than 99.99% of people throughout human history, do not decide whom to support based on such maneuvers. They never have, and they never will. Mostly, they follow what the ruling class endorses and what propaganda teaches them to endorse. That's not ideal. What is quite clear is that persuasion through moderation is simply seen as weakness or not seen at all. A slightly more sensible, related argument, not precisely tactical, is that the right should not now attempt to engage in cancellation because it is not actually effective, since the right still has very little power. As the Substack author, librarian of Kalino says, canceling Pinckney will have no effect on the New York Times and laptop class. There is some truth here. The moment that the right could get somebody canceled for celebrating the assassination attempt has already passed, as the left has reasserted their control of the narrative a little weaker than it was before. Today, Pinckney would no longer face any opprobrium for her post on Facebook. Certainly, it is pointless to try to exercise power one does not have, and except as related to the wars of the Israelis, it seems unlikely that at this moment anyone on the left will still be canceled. Still, it is possible that the right will achieve actual power soon, perhaps in the chaos surrounding the likely election of Trump in a few months. Thus, considering whether cancellation and similar tactics should be used is still important. Another related argument, again not precisely tactical but also not moral, is that the right should be magnanimous. Why, precisely, is never exactly explained. Apparently, since magnanimity is a good thing in the Western tradition, ever since Aristotle delineated its exercise, it is self-evidently clear that we should be magnanimous and that doing so will yield benefits. But as I said on X, quote, people on the right need to understand that magnanimity is only possible after total victory. Trying to be magnanimous before that is either preemptive surrender or, at best, shooting yourself in the foot and your allies in the back. Close quote. If you search for a single example of magnanimity by the left, you will be searching for a very long time, just as when Diogenes was searching for an honest man. There is a good reason for this, and it is not only the low and base character typical of those on the left. The moral arguments are more interesting and of general applicability to any right wielding of power upon the defeat of the left. These boil down to an eternal question. Should mercy or justice be exercised in any particular situation? St. Thomas Aquinas said that mercy and justice were not in contradiction. But he was speaking of God's mercy and justice, and that is not our topic today. Temporal mercy and temporal justice are often in contradiction, notably on display in a decision whether and to what extent to punish a criminal. A sovereign who pardons a man under sentence of death is showing mercy, but at least potentially eroding justice. It should be obvious insisting on placing temporal mercy before temporal justice is a very feminine characteristic, and this entire argument would not exist even 60 years ago when the public square of our society was more properly masculine. And we should also admit up front, justice no longer exists in America, which further changes the calculus. Or more precisely, reliable justice no longer exists, and unreliable justice is no justice at all. The correct response is not to default to mercy out of a misplaced kindness, because we cannot at this moment impose total justice. As the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle said of King Stephen, 1135 to 1154, and king during the anarchy, about which I will write a separate article, quote, he was a mild man, and gentle and good, and did no justice, close quote. The unreliability of our justice system, to be sure, has nothing to do with mildness or gentleness. It has to do with the left weaponizing the justice system, thereby destroying the rule of law. We would nonetheless examine the question of mercy and justice based on first principles. The short response is that mercy should never obtain over justice in political matters. It is useful, I think, to distinguish between types of enemies. People such as Pinckney are the public enemy, hostess, and such should be distinguished from the private enemy, inimicus. Last year, I wrote extensively on this topic in light of both scripture and Christian practice while discussing Carl Schmitt's The Concept of the Political. I will not repeat my analysis here, but it is highly relevant, and I strongly recommend you guys go read this. It's very good. Schmitt cites the late 18th century Italian language specialist Egidio Forcellini, who wrote a massive Latin lexicon regarded as the standard reference for the core of the distinction. Quote, a public enemy, hostess, is one with whom we are at war publicly. In this respect, he differs from a private enemy, inimicus. He is a person with whom we have private quarrels. They may be distinguished as follows. A private enemy is a person who hates us, whereas a public enemy is a person who fights against us. Close quote. We can ignore that Pinckney also hates us, and we are tempted to hate her. The source of that hatred is public war, not a private quarrel. Thus, she is hostess. A few critical responses were offered to my analysis of Schmidt, and I recently have drafted a detailed and naturally airtight refutation of those responses. But this article is long enough already that I will not publish that refutation here. You will have to wait. A Christian should love the private enemy, and if we cannot meet that command of Christ, we should certainly show mercy to the private enemy. On the other hand, the public enemy, the one who, in Schmidt's terms and in this instance, quote, intends to negate his opponent's way of life, and therefore must be repulsed or fought in order to preserve one's own form of existence, close quote, should never be shown mercy. It is a contradiction in terms or a form of self-hatred and betrayal to those to whom you owe your loyalty to do so. That said, we should admit two limiting principles. The first is proportionality. Justice should certainly be exercised against our enemies who are not powerful, but the rigor and strictness of that justice should take into account that the powerful are far more guilty and should face more extreme punishments. Simply because those latter cannot yet be reached does not mean that the extreme punishments justice demands we apply to them, such as confiscation of assets and exile, or what I propose as the future trivium of confiscation, lustration, and rustication, should now be applied to the little evil people, even if we could do so. Moreover, even justice against the public enemy, who are small fry, has limits. For example, I do not think taking any action against Pinckney that would result in her destitution, her inability to find any job, would be appropriate, nor certainly would any kind of private violence. Though, as I say, there is no chance of that today for any right action. To be sure, the left rejects this principle, but we are talking about morality, something the left, practically by definition, lacks. Moreover, we should be aware of the madness of crowds and avoid encouraging action based on what Gustave Le Bon identified as the different mind of a crowd. In a virtuous society, this would not be necessary, but we live in a deracinated mass society, against the excesses of which we must always be on guard, even on the right. The second limiting principle is that we should always keep in mind that while people such as Pinckney are the enemy, they are not, usually, irredeemable. In any ideological system, defined by James Burnham as, quote, a more or less systematic and self-contained set of ideas supposedly dealing with the nature of reality and calling for a commitment independent of specific experience or events, close quote. The vast majority of its adherents will, as I often point out, simply change their views when a new set of political arrangements, antithetical to the ideology to which they previously devoted their lives, arrives. Yes, this is not more likely and will not happen sooner if we stay our hand against Pinckney. It will be purely a consequence of the change of the dominant social power, the ruling class, and the principles which animate it. Still, we should remember that our goal is not to exclude Pinckney from our society, but to welcome her into it when she has adjusted her views. It is only the hard core of the left, perhaps 5 or 10%, who must be removed entirely from our society in order to cut out their cancer. Finally, how we should implement justice after the final victory of the right is an important topic. It is not that doing so will be difficult. All of Western history shows clear ways for a rigorous yet fair judicial process to be implemented. This will not be a mere inversion of the left's eternal terror. Whenever in history, whether in 1939 Spain, 1919 Finland, or 1973 Chile, when the right administers justice, it is not terror at all. The left dubs such justice white terrors, but that is merely a tendentious lie, meant to excuse the red terror that inevitably arrives at the exact same time as total left power. Such administration of justice by the right has been, for the most part, simple, direct justice. True, as with all human action, errors are sometimes made, and personal score settling or ethnic hatred is sometimes allowed to taint the process, understandably but illegitimately. That is an argument for judicial rigor, not for rejecting the administration of justice. But this article is long enough, and that topic is, at this moment, very theoretical. If such events come to pass, what will be done and what can be done will develop organically. And such events seem farther away than they did 2 weeks ago. No need to spend time on musing about abstractions. We should simply take away that our imperative is to constantly be on the offensive against any salient of the left, whoever that may be. And then he's got some related links that are all worth reading as well. I've read most of these. All right. I really appreciate, that was long, but I really appreciate Haywood's insight into this, particularly the detail about the public versus private enemy. So I want to signal boost it to whatever extent that I can. I appreciate you guys sitting through that. Hopefully it was enjoyable. The last thing I've got here today is a thread that I typed out last night as I was contemplating the events of the next several months. I'm going to share the screen here. Do me a favor and hit the like button if you're still in here. We still got 85 watching on YouTube. 57 likes. And if you're watching on Twitter, do me a favor and go over and retweet the stream. You can find it on my my Twitter profile. So this is what I wrote last night, the thread. A democracy can only survive as long as it's preserved by a power not subject to democracy. There's a paradox in here. Though most people aren't willing to stare this truth in the eyes, everyone assumes it implicitly when they discuss American politics. Everyone is always talking about the managers and the necessity of, like, implicitly, everyone's talking about how are the voters going to be constrained in this way or that way. No, we have a republic, not a democracy. Oh, we need the experts, rule by the experts. There needs to be something that is not subject to democracy that manages and maintains the purity of democracy. This is implicitly presumed by everyone, but nobody wants to actually acknowledge it head on. And we're headed in the direction where it's going to be acknowledged head on. The real debate that it would be better and more honest for us to have sooner rather than later is whether that power that preserves ought to be more diffuse or more concentrated. Concede the democracy debate. It is not democracy, yes or no. Managed democracy is the future. Who will manage it is the question. So stop having the fake debate, democracy, yes or no. It's not going anywhere. The question we need to have is, yes, democracy is good. Great, yes, let's have democracy. Who's going to manage it? It's going to be managed by someone who is not democratically contained. There will be a point where that will happen. It's already happening, and it's going to continue. In theory, both options have pros and cons. I said theory, you dumb phone. It's not a smartphone, it's a dumb phone. In theory, both options have pros and cons. One might say history tells a story one way or the other, but that's what history is, a story agreed upon. It's an appeal to power, not a justification for it. So you can make the arguments of, oh, well, history, you got the monarchs, and the monarchs have ruled more effectively, and there's this pragmatic case for having more centralized because it's just, the decentralization causes inefficiency, and then you get nobody's held responsible. That stuff doesn't, that's only, you're preaching to the choir. You're just going to get into a false debate about the pros and cons of monarchy or republics versus democracies, or like this is a fake conversation. It's not going to go anywhere. You're just going to run around and around and around in circles because history is not objective. There's no science to history. It's by definition, it's a story that everyone just agrees upon. And then people jostle over what the story actually says. But ultimately, those who have power will reinforce the story that they want told. So when you try to appeal to history, you're not trying to justify power. You're actually just appealing to power by definition. Democracy isn't going away. It's far too deeply rooted in the Western psyche, and there are so many different, yet to be discovered iterations through which it can morph, like the network state. All these different technological applications with crypto and city and an app and all these free private cities, all these different things are going down different technological rabbit holes that are different iterations for how to do democracy. And there's still going to be tons and tons of new iterations. You're not going to get people to abandon democracy up front. They're going to be like, well, no, let's do democracy this way. Actually, no, let's do democracy this way. The democracy bug is going to be there for a long time. You can't fight it. You have to work with it. Absolutely diffuse managed democracy is not democracy at all because there is no management. If all are managers, none are. So if every single person is a manager, then there's no managers. So if it's absolutely diffuse, otherwise known as communism, then there's no management at all. So actually, the bad thing about the absolutely diffused managed democracy is that you don't get democracy. We need the democracy. We need the democracy to be managed by people who know how to manage it and will manage it honestly and truly. Absolutely concentrated managed democracy is as effective, that is, as true as possible to its spirit of uplifting the people to the good, the true, and the beautiful, as it is clear precisely who the managers are. The more hidden from view they become, the less effectively democratic it is. Again, speaking in terms of the ideal of government representative of the people's interests. When people talk about democracy, this is what they're not actually. If you get too autistic talking about, oh, it's voting and direct voting, and you have all the people and they vote for the thing, and then the thing happens, and When people are talking about democracy, they're using the term democracy. Overwhelmingly, unless you're like a weird niche political spurg, democracy is a euphemism for government that's representative of the people's interests. That's not being harshly imposed upon the people, but it's representative of the people, the nation, uplifting it, directing it toward the good, the true, and the beautiful, and the prosperous, and the growth and thriving. And that's a good thing for people to think that way. We do need government that is as true as possible to the spirit of uplifting the people to the good, the true, and the beautiful. This is the definition of democracy. And we are fighting for managed democracy. Democracy that is managed by managers who are where it is as clear as possible who they are and who is responsible for managing it. And they are held responsible when they don't manage it properly. We don't want the managers hiding in the shadows. We want the managers out in the open. If American government is to be sustained into the future, it will only be through extra democratic means. Now, I need to be careful about some of the stuff I say. I don't know exactly what lines, when I'm crossing a line, and I don't want to negligently cross one. But I hope you can kind of read between the lines with some of this. There is going to come a time where the only way that American government is going to be sustained is through extra democratic means. And there's kind of an irony to this. Actually, I say this in the next tweet. You can see that this is true in the ironic posture of the inner party of the regime, the party of Democrats. They're literally named Democrats, abandoning even the premise of democracy, even as they claim to champion it. Their actions reveal what they believe. And I'm meaning specifically like the ousting of Joe Biden, the blackmailing. Tucker talked to Mike Lee just recently. That's a very good conversation that just dropped. They're like, hold on a second. Isn't this like actually probably criminal that you have Barack Obama and Kamala Harris leveraging the 25th Amendment to force Joe Biden to step down? So you get a presidential nominee that there's nothing democratic about this whatsoever. They're not even trying to maintain the premise of it. They're becoming more blatantly open and transparent about who is managing this democracy. Their actions reveal what they believe. I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually cease to even pay lip service. Things are moving too quickly for them now, and the board is stacking against them. And they are, little by little, having chipped away from them even the instinct to preserve the pretenses of their magical sacred word. They've stopped building things. One cannot govern if one does not build. Sitting in the pilot's chair as a plane crashes is not flying a plane. One cannot squeeze blood from a stone. Their project is doomed to fail. They can sure squeeze a hell of a lot of blood out of Americans, though. Armed with this knowledge, we must proceed with great caution because all we're negotiating at this point is how much damage will be done in their fallout. One might think that the longer it takes, the worse it gets, but that's not necessarily true. They must fall at precisely the right time, not too soon and not too late. We must be wise. Because if they fall too soon, and you get a mad, chaotic scramble, then we're lacking in wisdom right now. And we're not likely to get a great influx of spiritual wisdom right at the moment that we need it most. We need time to build that up. But it also can't take too long either. Because if they go too far, like when the plane's going down, there's a point at which you're not going to be able to pull out of the dive. Even if the best pilot in the world jumped into the seat, pushed you out of the way, and scooped you up out of the dive. So it has to happen at just the right time. And in just the right way as well. Because it has to be clear when they go down. It has to be clear that they are responsible for going down and they ought to go down. And it's an easy sell that they don't belong there anymore. If American government is to be sustained into the future, it will only be through the continuous, coordinated, courageous decisions of individual people in individual moments upon whom will rest the weight of history. I think in particular of the things that are going to go down in the halls of power, in vote counting booths and reporters and security operations and all sorts of stuff that's going to happen over the next 4 to 6 months. We ought to pray daily for wisdom for us and them. And to whatever extent us and them are the same people. The people who wind up in a position where you're forced to make a decision and you've got the weight of history on you. You're choosing which narrative you're going to feed into and amplify that will have the downstream effect of deciding the course of the country. It's going to come down to individual people, an individual who nobody knows, nobody's ever heard of, nobody probably will ever hear of them. And their conscience is speaking to them. And they have to make a call. Am I going to do this or am I going to do this? Am I going to participate in this operation or am I going to participate in this operation? We may never know who these people are. Maybe we will. Maybe they'll be mythologized. There'll be hagiographies written about them. I'm sure there will be some archetypes that will be pulled out, regardless of who wins. Similar to the Time magazine piece. There's a hagiography about the people who supported the fortification. This election is going to be fortified from two directions. The fortification efforts are underway and have been underway. The question is who is going to win, and in what state will be the condition of the soul of the person who participates in these various things. I said, America will be born through this crucible by the grace of God. May she and our souls with her emerge purified and victorious. Pray, guys. You got to pray. You got to be ready to take action in whatever way it's demanded of you, and to take prudent, wise, circumspect action. Pete Quinones today had the best one-liner that I highlighted. I tweeted out, and I'll leave you guys with that. He said, build wealth, build family, build community, build locally. No matter how this turns out, no matter how the next several months play out, building locally is going to be essential for moving forward. Whether we're moving forward under an openly hostile regime that's coming after us, or moving forward under an indifferent regime who's taken the heat off of us for a period of time. In either case, we have a tremendous amount of local infrastructure we need to build out. That means local in terms of physical geography, local to you, and it also means local in terms of what's close to you. There's digital infrastructure that's close to you, and you need to be plugged into that. Plug yourself into a community of people who are thinking this way and who are making plans, who could be resources financially, in terms of food, medicine, products, like economic supply chains, news sources. As if things go haywire, you need to be able to understand what's happening and have good connections. You've got to be investing locally, both locally physically and locally digitally. This is why we have the King Pill Discord. Precisely for this reason, among other things. So if you'd like to be a part of an existing community that's already swapping knowledge and support, and also just having a good time entertaining one another, go to kingpill.com and sign up. This Friday evening, we'll be doing another Schizo stream. We're taking submissions right now for what you want to do for the Schizo stream. And any tier that you sign up for, you'll get access to that. And we'll let you know here, hopefully, probably next week, we'll be announcing our new partner at the King Pill Discord. So kingpill.com, go sign up, join the group, and like the stream on your way out. Appreciate you guys watching and hanging out. And I will catch you tomorrow on the next edition of the ASTROLABE